Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting. We will begin shortly. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Committee of the Whole. The meeting will begin shortly. Thank you.
Test, Victoria, test.
Test, test. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just want to make sure, Ms. Morden, that you can, or whoever's managing the meeting in the room, if you can hear me okay?
We can hear you, Your Worship, and I believe we actually are live streaming.
Excellent. We are due to start in just under 2 minutes, so we'll just,
Sure.
I'll mute myself until that time. I just wanted to make sure all the things were working here, so thank you. Thank you, everyone. Is Ms. Morden, is Councillor Zelka on the call?
I'm not seeing him, Your Worship. We can certainly try to reach out on text.
Yeah, please do. I don't
Sure.
mind calling the meeting to order, but I just don't want him to miss any of the pieces. I'll wait a minute until he comes on. So for those waiting and watching, we're giving it a minute here. We're just short one counselor. We often have some technical issues with people arriving and connecting, so we're just going to wait for Councillor Zelka to connect if we can. And if we cannot get a hold of him, then we will start the meeting.
Right.
There we go. Councillor Zelka is just joining us. So with that, I'm going to call our Committee of the Whole meeting for January the 17th to order. Welcome, and as we start our meeting, we acknowledge, as we always do, that the lands on which we're gathered are the traditional territories of the Coast and the Strait Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and the Songhees nations. Their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved and seconded. Do I see a second hand? Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? Thank you very much. Item number 3 is our public comment and question period. Before I get to that, I just want to make a note that I am unable to be in the chambers today, so I will be chairing the meeting. But if there's technical issues from my end, I'm at a friend's place tonight. There is then Councillor Green as the acting mayor in January, and we'll be taking over the meeting. So if there's issues, I will be handing them over. And I'm very much appreciative of Councillor Green. Thank you, Councillor Green, for being in the chambers and being able to be there. Under our procedures bylaw and provincial legislation, we are required to start the meeting with at least with a member of council present there. So it's very important that we did that procedurally. The public comment and question period is an open period that members of the public can address council. And this is not the delegations who have a scheduled piece, but just anybody from the public who wishes to address council on any issues or items of interest to them related to Oak Bay. We have a maximum of 30 minutes, but we have 3 minutes per speaker. If you've dialed in to the live stream, you hit *9 to raise your hand. And then once I call upon you, I'll identify you by your phone number. It would be *6 to unmute, but I'll give you those instructions. Again, so if you've called in and you wish to address council on items of interest, *9 is the appropriate piece. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may also use the reactions tab, which is typically at the bottom of the screen. And that you can use that. If you click on reactions and go to raise hand, then I will see that you wish to speak. And if none of that works and you're on Zoom, you can always open up your video and wave frantically here, and we'll do our best to get to you as well. We are meeting as committee today, not as council, and so we're a little less formal, and we can take different approaches. Our important thing, if anybody wishes to speak to us, that we allow that to happen. So I'm going to give that a moment because our live stream can sometimes take a minute to get from here into the YouTube channel. So just out of courtesy, if people are wish to address us and are joining us by phone, then you can call us at the 1-855 number on the agenda, hit the ID number and the passcode. And once you're in, you hit the *9 to raise your hand. So I'll give you that give that a moment for people to do. Again, it's the 1-855-703-8985, the ID number ending in 5274 and the passcode ending in 868. And then we will, once you're in, you can hit *9. We don't usually have massive crowds calling in on these items, but I do want to give a chance, should anybody wish to address council, to have that. So we'll just give it one more minute here. Ms. Morden, I'm going to rely on you if someone is raising their hand or has indicated. Sorry, I am just doing the wrong thing on my screen. Ms. Morden, is there anybody that on your end that you see that has indicated that they wish to address council at the public comment and question period?
I do not see any raised hands, Your Worship.
Okay, then. Well, that is very simple. I will, however, if people are trying, if you don't mind, keep trying. What I'll do now is I'm just, in the interest of managing time, we're going to move on to adoption of the minutes and delegations. And once we go through the 2 5-minute delegations, I'll just make another call to the public in case there is any technical issues preventing them from calling in. So at this point, I'm going to go to item number 4.1, which is the minutes of the regular committee of the whole from November the 15th. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve? And then we move and seconded. Thank you. Are there any corrections, changes, amendments that people wish to see? I don't see any hands raised, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much for that. We are happy to welcome a couple of delegations here this evening. Item number 5.1, the first delegation is Reconciliation Oak Bay. And so I will invite you to speak in just a second. I think it's I just want to say this is the first time we've actually, or maybe the second time we've had delegations under the new procedures bylaw. So we're very excited to have these delegations here and to address council. This is a chance for people who have maybe a bit more to say than the 3 minutes, have 5 minutes, and can provide a presentation and so forth if they wish. So first up, we have Reconciliation Oak Bay. And I believe we have Reverend Ebert here, but I also see we have other members of Reconciliation Oak Bay as well with their video on. So Reverend Ebert, I'll invite you first. If you could just state your name and the organization you're representing here tonight, and we can start your time on your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is the Reverend Canon Craig Hebert. I'm the rector at St. Mary's in Oak Bay, St. Mary's Anglican Church, and here as a member of the core group of Reconciliation Oak Bay. And also present, I know, is the Reverend Michelle Slater from Oak Bay United Church, and Bruce Kilpatrick, who's also a member of the Community Association of Oak Bay, also core members of Reconciliation. And thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for giving us this opportunity to formally introduce ourselves. I know we've had interactions one-on-one in various contexts over the last few months, but we really appreciate the opportunity to kind of get things off on a positive foot in terms of who we are and what we hope to be able to accomplish in the community and together with you. So back in late September, we announced the formation of our network as a community-based network, working towards truth-telling and healing and reconciliation. And of course, as we all know, actions from the community by community members and organizations had already been taking place well before that. We can point especially to the Snoyoth Pole project, which came to its culmination at the dedication in 2015, which brought together several community groups as well as council itself or district itself. The Snoyoth Pole itself represents a commitment by all of us to the fostering of a new relationship, particularly with the Lekwungen peoples of this place. Some years have passed, but then of course came 2021 and the discoveries of the graves of children at residential school sites. And these once again brought the matter of reconciliation back to the forefront for non-Indigenous Canadians. We applaud Council's unanimous motion back in March of 2021 to take concrete steps to foster relationships with Songhees and Esquimalt nations and to support further initiatives. But it's become increasingly clear that any meaningful progress at reconciliation, see our name and our what we're about is now starting to be a tongue twister here. Any meaningful progress at reconciliation between non-Indigenous and Indigenous peoples depends on a transformation that takes place deep within us, the settler-descended community, both as individuals and collectively. Growing in understanding seems to be the way forward. And so it was that last summer, representatives from Oak Bay United, St. Mary's, and the Community Association met to organize to start with a Kairos blanket exercise in order to foster just this kind of understanding. At the same time, with the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation just around the corner, we decided to host a screening of the film about the making of the witness blanket. And finally, we also felt very strongly about the importance of a community observance to mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And so we took that project on as well. And we were extremely gratified by the huge public turnout at the Snoyoth Pole on September 30th. And thus was born Reconciliation Oak Bay. We're a network of ordinary people like everyone else here at this meeting, who feel passionately enough about the journey of reconciliation that we feel compelled to take concrete action wherever possible right here in Oak Bay. Our many conversations with fellow residents reveal a similarly strong feeling about the rightness of this journey. As the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said, "Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good that overwhelm the world." So where to now? There are things that we as a network can do and perhaps do well as a community-based organization or organizations. We can help to be part of the transformation of hearts and minds, organizing and hosting events that inform, that foster conversation and dialogue, in short, that foster relationships face to face. We've mentioned some of those now and more are listed in our statement of purpose. We're also in the process of launching a website that can act as a hub for sharing resources relevant to community efforts at reconciliation. there are also things that we should be doing together in close cooperation with our municipal government, and especially with its leadership. Things like organizing and especially attending events that mark the universal significance of this part of our common life, this tragedy of our historical dealings with First Peoples of this place and their current consequences and the need for a new way forward. These are events that need to involve all levels of our community, from the young family next door all the way through to community and municipal leaders. And there are things that only you, the policymakers and implementers, the leaders and servants of Oak Bay, can do. Things like making manifest your stated commitment from March to the goals and principles of reconciliation. These are the things that you have been elected to accomplish on our behalf. Things like updating the public-facing history of Oak Bay in both print and online channels to include the pre-settler and current relationships of Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. And another very significant matter is the redevelopment planning process for the Marina spewing land. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to demonstrate transparently that there is a way to proceed on this file in a way that advances us as a community along the road toward reconciliation. That, frankly, reconciliation is not only for things that carry no economic risk for us, who have held all the economic cards for the past 100 years.
Reverend Ebert, we're 30 seconds over your 5-minute allotted time. So I'm just going to ask you if you can wrap it up.
So we have invitations and questions. We invite you to join Reconciliation Oak Bay in the community officially on September 30th, 2022 for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And also we'll be hosting a Kairos blanket exercise as soon as restrictions allow. And we invite you to take part in that too. And our questions are, from your perspective, what are some of the ways in which we as a network and the district can best collaborate? How can we work best together on this quest? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Ebert. I really appreciate the presentation. And certainly your shared goals are our shared goals in this matter. And so I really think it's wonderful that you're helping to organize members of the community together and be more nimble in many ways than obviously as a municipality we can be. And I'm looking forward to the chance that we can work together on aligning our messages and our work forward on that. So thank you for that. We do allow, if there's questions of council to the delegation, I'll allow a couple of minutes for that before we move on to the next presentation. Are there any questions of council to the presenters? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson, if you could just again relate to questions, not more than comments, but go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, I would really like to thank the delegation that has presented tonight and also applaud the work that has been achieved to date, the work on certainly the recognition of the Indigenous Day. And so I think that that's really important to recognize. I was wondering if Reverend Hebert might give us some indication of the number of representatives they have right now that are participating in Reconciliation.
Reverend Ebert?
Yes. So besides the initial 3 organizations, we've also included recently the UVics Living Lab project and also the Heritage Foundation of Oak Bay. I believe there are some others that are in discussion about making this formal in terms of joining in with us, but until they're ready to do that, I don't want to list some names.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor, I just would like to say that understanding that Council is supportive of both Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, I am prepared to bring forward a notice of motion to support the initiatives put forward by the delegation tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Patterson. And we can get to those under new business later in the meeting here tonight. So thank you for that.
I will speak later to them then.
Yes, and I think it's important to, in fairness, recognize, I think all but one councillor was able to attend either the reconciliation event that was put together on such short notice here in Oak Bay, which is very well attended, or the regional event that was put on by the Songhees in the Esquimalt Nation that was held out in Colwood. That was also a wonderful event that recognized that. So I think there's a lot of upstick in support here on behalf of the council. Go ahead, Councillor Name.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Reverend Herbert and the rest of the delegation and other community members who have worked to put this statement of purpose together. And I really appreciate that you've come forward and articulated some very specific actions that you want to move forward with. And so in that respect, I'm looking forward to, and I'm hoping that the council will support the notice of motions that Councillor Patterson's going to put forward. But I have a specific question. I'm just wondering if you could help us. Obviously, you've spoken to some extent around a partnership here, and a partnership often is something that's often in process. And I'm just wondering, as council sets its mind to what this might look like, and I'm hoping that we will be engaging you in this delegation here. Have you anything specific that you could speak to that might help guide council about what a partnership might look like? It's early days, but I'm just wondering if anything stands out in particular.
I think maybe. Oh, sorry, Your Worship. I think the example of of the event back on September 30th, which we did put together at a short notice, I think was a good example of one of those things. I think as we look forward, I guess our invitation is not necessarily that you let us do it all, but be a little bit more proactive in terms of how we go forward in something like the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. There will come times when we are planning to organize or host events and looking for places to do that. And insofar as the district has resources that are able to be leveraged for that, to be open for our request of that kind of thing. And even the other way around, if there's something, the mayor mentioned nimbleness. We're a little bit more nimble than a so-called bureaucracy, although there's a lot of bureaucracy in all of our organizations. But if there is something that is on the horizon that where council would appreciate having some more feet on the ground to be able to mobilize or host conversations, dialogues, whatever. I mean, I think I could speak for all of the individual organizations that's something that would be totally within a partnership kind of arrangement. I would defer also to my colleagues on the delegation, Bruce or Michelle, to add. I know Bruce has got his hand up there.
Sure. Mr. Kilpatrick, you're more than welcome to further that response.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Murdoch. Maybe just to pick up on part of Councillor Nay's specific question, I wonder if it wouldn't be valuable to create some kind of nimble mechanism that would keep the conversation going, that would allow us to gather around a single table virtually, if not in person, but at least to kind of organize our thoughts between ourselves. That is the district and the community as represented by Reconciliation Oak Bay, so that we can start that conversation and keep it going. Because I think we all agree, a lot of work to be done, and we've made a start, but there's a lot of things that we could be doing together now and in the longer term future.
Thank you, Mr. Kilpatrick. Anything else? Is there a good councillor name?
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that we're probably going to be looking for some kind of mechanism of governance that will allow us to coordinate and collaborate, because you've talked more than just about initiatives. It's really about bringing alive a lens through which we do all of our work and so many of our projects. So I'm sure I speak for all of council. I sure look forward to working with you on this and developing this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ney. I just need a motion to receive the verbal presentation, moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other questions of the delegation here? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. I'm not online, so I didn't know how to raise my hand properly. I just want to thank Reverend Hebert and the members of Reconciliation who came to do the presentation tonight. I very much appreciate it, and I'm impressed with the speed by which you have accomplished and achieved events and membership in such a short time. And speaking of membership, I just wanted to ask you, I've had individual residents ask me how they can become involved and possibly join Reconciliation. Could you just give us some information? This is a chance to make it more public on how people could get involved. And thank you again for a great presentation.
Thank you. Reverend Ebert?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those areas where we are, even our statement of purpose is like a living document. We all agreed. We are meeting generally once a month in terms of representatives from the core organizational groups, and we're just about ready to launch our website, which will then be a place where people can get in touch and get in contact. But I think that's a very good option, because for people who aren't necessarily members of the community association, although we kind of feel like the community association does a good job of being a larger umbrella. Oak Bay United Church, the Anglican Church, we as our organizations have circles, but they're overlapping circles. So we'd love to have as many people as possible being part of the conversation, but we also want to maintain the nimbleness of being able to get things done, which is, when we have a committee of 50, might be a little harder to do. So I guess that's all I would say to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka. A question?
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Chair. And sincere thanks to the delegation coming forward. This is important work. I wanted to noted that over the summertime, there was that wonderful letter that was signed not only by the First Nations, local First Nations, but also attended by local authority, provincial and federal representatives with respect to calling for peace and respect, having to do with the vandalism that was raised around the burning of the totem, and also the burning, the tearing down of statues, and also elsewhere around the country, the burning of churches. So my question related to that was, do you see this work contributing to the first of all the peace and respect that we need to show each other, but also some way of coming together, these ideas that are referred to as colonial. The fundamentals of Canada being peace, order, and good government, and then of course the aspect that I'm familiar with, at least with the law of peace, from my exposures out east to First Nations. So I wanted to ask those questions and whether I could have maybe some comments about how we can help with that process and how your organization will be helping with that.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. And at some point we have to take this offline because we can't go through too much detail here tonight. But Reverend Ebert, if you could perhaps give some sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said in our presentation, the gist of what drew us together as a group of organizations at first was a recognition that there are elements in which we need to change in our own understanding. Reconciliation isn't going to be something where we have to rely on somebody else to do for us. It's really actually up to us to begin to understand our own part in things and also understand others. And I think that's where some of our organizations are really good at gathering together people for dialogue, for discussion, for conversation, for building of relationships at a face-to-face level. I think, frankly, the policy stuff is, of course, in council's hands and other local government's hands, and it's the stuff in between that we work on together. So I think I would just say that we're committed to being part of that mutual understanding. I think Reverend Slater and myself, of course, being from two of the three churches that were part of the initial understanding as part of the Truth and Reconciliation process formally, have done a whole lot of interior work, or continuing to do a whole lot of interior work, trying to recognize honestly what our role in all of this has been. And then finding ways to be able to build respectful relationships moving forward and to find a new way forward. I don't think we have answers to that, but I think what the core of our answer is, we need to listen. We need to listen really, really hard. Sometimes we really need to listen to ourselves.
Thank you, Reverend Ebert. I don't see any other hands up. We have a motion to receive on the floor. Before I call the question, I'll just express my appreciation for the presentation and the thoughtful questions of council. Definitely, there's room here for lots of joint work going forward. I think there's lots of shared goals here, and very much appreciate. I think the more that we see individual members, leadership of the churches and community association, leadership of council, individual residents, I think the more we talk about the subject and share understandings of it, and the more that we speak directly with the First Nations on topics of interest to them, which is often the hard part in all this, is finding those corridors, especially in COVID, has definitely made things more difficult. We have, I think, a very positive world forward. This is not a destination, it's a journey. And so we're looking forward to, I very much appreciate you presenting one more step in that journey together with us tonight here. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, none opposed. Thank you very much. And moving on to, and you're more than welcome to stay in the meeting or leave the meeting. If I could maybe ask the delegates from Reconciliation, if you could turn off your cameras, then all of my counselors pop to the top of my screen and I can run the meeting a little bit easier. Thank you very much. Up next, we have Modo Cooperative related to car sharing in Oak Bay. We have Sylvain Salaire, I believe, is the representative here for Modo. And with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and your organization, a municipality of residence or business, and we will then I'll start the timer for 5 minutes and we'll take your presentation and get to questions. Welcome very much. Welcome this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of the council. Good evening. I'm going to share my screen. I have a little presentation, which I believe was shared with the council. Can someone confirm that they can see my screen?
It's just starting the screen sharing, but it should pop up here in a second. There it is on my screen. I'm assuming it's on everybody's screen at this point. So please begin.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share this presentation with you. I'm the Director of Business Development for Modo Cooperative, and our members refer to us as Modo. So I'll simply refer to the organization as such. Modo is a social enterprise that is cooperatively owned by thousands of residents of BC. We're determined to make a difference in our communities by addressing affordability, inclusivity, and sustainability issues through the provision of a network of shared vehicles. And we are proud to be present in 25 municipalities today, including yours. Our members achieve positive outcomes for themselves and their communities by choosing to use shared vehicles instead of personal ones. And to best harness the benefits of round-trip car sharing at the community level, municipalities can take multiple steps. The slide, so for the folks that are listening to the meeting over the phone, I apologize if you do not get to see the presentation, and I will read the slide here. Municipalities can support car sharing and the benefits in different ways. They can create reason. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but if people are watching, you may of course follow along that the presentation is in the agenda package. I just want people to know that they can see it if they go to the agenda package. So nobody should be left too far behind here. But please continue.
Okay. No, thank you very much for the clarification. I wasn't aware. So municipalities can assess, really harness the benefits for their constituents and themselves in terms of car sharing by taking different actions. The first one really is creating reasons for people not to need to own a vehicle. So they are less dependent on driving, and therefore car sharing becomes a more relevant option. They can also develop knowledge-based land use and parking policies that anticipate and shape the future of shared mobility services, of course, including car sharing, but others such as bike sharing. They can make it convenient for people to car share. And this really is pretty simple, is making sure that folks have access to shared vehicles within a 5-minute walk of their home. and making sure that car sharing is affordable, and that goes by having parking spaces that are affordable. And then a couple other points: ensuring that car sharing is well integrated in transportation demand management programs, including a clear definition of the roles of real estate developers. And then last but not least is by taking a leadership position by integrating car sharing into their own operations. So in the district, we've seen an opportunity to align various policies. The OCP supports car sharing, but there are a few bylaws in the district that would need to be updated to allow a car sharing service like Modo to really better serve the local community. And again, if we look at the OCP policy, T17 requires transportation demand management studies and measures, which are measures that are really facilitating the use of sustainable modes of transportation, a better use of the transportation network. And so these measures have to be contemplated for new developments, but round-trip car sharing is missing from the list of from the options that are considered by the district. So we feel like it's a missed opportunity for the district and its constituents. So we have a request, actually 3. So Modo is kindly requesting that the district considers directing municipal staff to establish a point of contact among municipal staff for matters related to car sharing. Second, adapt the district regulatory framework in alignment with its OCP to facilitate access to and use of round-trip car share vehicles in Oak Bay by its residents. And then finally, explore opportunities for assisting car share operators to use zero-emission vehicles in the district. And I'll share that Modo is committed to having a fleet that is 100% zero emission by the end of the decade, and it's going to be a big challenge. That will conclude my presentation, and with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for stopping the screen share so we can see the faces again. We now get to questions of council. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much. And thanks very much for your presentation. It's very timely for us right now, I think. I like the 3 requests that you have to us. And I guess, Mayor, my question would be, this is just a delegation to us. So what would be the process for us to be able to ask staff questions in regards to some of the points that have been brought up in this presentation?
So thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. The appropriate process under our procedures bylaw, becomes under section 18, is that the council can basically, with items like this, really refer staff to come back with a preparation of a staff report related to those 3 things. You could also refer it to a committee or commission if that was the will, or if it's something that say requesting a letter of support, we can also make that recommendation under for these items. So those are the things under the delegation section of a procedures bylaw that we can do. So if you wish staff to come back with to look at options for addressing those 3 points, the appropriate motion would be to refer to staff for a report back on those 3 items.
So I could make that motion now, and then I do have a couple of questions after, if that's okay.
You may,
okay.
If there is, as long as there's a seconder for the seconded. Thank you. So that motion is live, and we'll also take a motion to receive when this is all done as well. But go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. I guess that I'm looking forward to seeing what staff will come back with in regards to those requests that Modo is making. But I do have a question of the presenter, and that is, I know that there's also a business called Evo that's in business in Victoria, but they're not in Oak Bay right now. So can you tell me, do you work closely with them, or is it 2 totally separate businesses? And is there a chance that if we do certain things within the municipality that's just with Modo, does then that mean that Evo doesn't have the opportunity to come in and do business also?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Welcome. Mr. Solaire.
Thank you for your questions. There are multi parts to it, so I will try to answer all of them. And if my answer is incomplete, feel free to ask for additional elements. Modo and Evo operate two very distinct type of car sharing services. They're very distinct, and to best harness their benefits and mitigate some of the risks, it is best not to have a one-size-fits-all policy. It is really important to distinguish the two. So it is equitable for the operators. It is beneficial for the municipality and its constituents. The service that Modo offers is what we call a round-trip station-based car sharing service. That means that you're going to have a vehicle living at the corner of your street. This car is always going to be picked up and returned there. You can book this car up to a year in advance. You're going to use it as a replacement to your car to go grocery shopping or social activities or go anywhere on the island. That's what we do. What Evo does is what we call one-way free floating. And it's very much like a drive it yourself taxi, where you can pick up and return and you can pick up and drop off the car anywhere within a geofenced area. So the type of trips that they serve are really different from the type of trips that we serve. You can't take a moto to commute to Victoria and drop the moto there and never return it. It doesn't work. But you can do this with an Evo. So you can imagine, in terms of land use and parking, how these two services need to be regulated differently. So we would hope that if we discuss how you can make it easier for your residents to car share, we would hope that you take into consideration these different aspects of the services. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. Thank you so much. And then I guess my other question is, you only have two, from your report, I see that you only have 2 cars in Oak Bay right now. What do you think is the number that you would like to see in the future in Oak Bay? I think you said there's 77 in City of Victoria and there's 2 in Oak Bay.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to answer because as a co-op, we are owned by the members. We do act for the benefit of the members. So we will add vehicles where close to where a member lives or where they need those cars. Of course, we need a certain number of members, certain level of activity to justify placing a car close to them. But we are not seeking to maximize profit. So, if we see that over time, there is an additional need in Oak Bay to justify an additional car, which is currently the case, because there's a lot of demand for one of the 2 vehicles, we will be looking at a way to add a vehicle there, and then we will simply follow the need of our members. And what happens really is that you have members joining, then you justify a vehicle, then there's a vehicle that makes it more appealing for folks living close by to join. We see more members. That means that we have a need for more vehicles attract more members attract more car. And so it's a bit of an incremental process. So over time, we don't know how high, but what's important really as well for the community to understand is that every motor vehicle that is added in the streets or in the community takes off between 9 and 13 privately owned vehicles, because these folks using the service, in majority, they tend to get rid of a car or their second car, or they simply just don't buy a car. So that's really freeing up parking space. So if there are folks that are anxious about, those services, at least Moto really taking up the street, first, we don't see a growth that is going to, disrupt anyone. The growth is steady, fairly slow. And then if you see more shared vehicles in the community at the same time, you'll see less privately owned vehicles. So it should be only better, even for folks who do have a car or 2.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. And thank you again for your presentation. It's very timely.
I have Councillor Appleton and then Patterson and then Ney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Slayer, for the presentation. It was very, very timely and very and well-grounded, excellent information. Thank you very much. And picking up on something that Mr. Soler just mentioned, I think it's worth drawing a big line under the piece of information that's included in the presentation, where it talks about that only 1 in 3 households that's participating in the Modo service actually owns a vehicle, which I think is extremely significant, because obviously we've heard much dialogue in the community about the increase in parking, car ownership, and the concerns about parking. So I think the comments from Mr. Soler are definitely timely. The question that I have, Your Worship, is I was wondering whether Mr. Soler might be prepared to comment on this sort of uptake of car sharing more generally. This is a relatively, I think, where we've gotten used to seeing car share vehicles in the community, and sort of where we tune them into the background now and sort of take them for granted. But a decade ago, this was not necessarily the case. So I'm just wondering whether we might hear some comments about just sort of how popular a service this is and sort of the uptake of people using this type of service. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I touched on this a bit in your presentation, Mr. Soler, but please elaborate a little.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll say that Modo in 2016 amalgamated with the Victoria Car Share Co-op, and the two organizations have been in service since the late 1990s. And so we saw the growth of these two really grassroots organizations from 2 handfuls of members and a couple of cars that they had been able to gather, between themselves, to now just one joint organization that operates in Greater Victoria, and then on the mainland. We have 25,000 members. So the growth hasn't been exponential, but because of the nature of the business as a co-op, we're really resilient. And we see that we serve the need of folks that really don't want to go or go back, but most of them go to buying a vehicle and then becoming dependent on that and having to deal with all the financial burden. So we think that as the communities evolve and it becomes easier to walk and cycle and take the bus, and now with more folks working from home, we only think that as the communities evolve and become more people-centric, we're going to see an increase in interest for this type of service, which is car sharing and other forms of sustainable mobility. So I don't think there's going to be an exponential growth, but I think that long term, this is a service that is going to serve the need of folks who want to move more sustainably and also want to think about, their expenses. If they save money by car sharing instead of owning a car, that means they have more money for rent and mortgage and education and anything else that they value more than, a car. So sorry, I could speak for a long time. Please interrupt me anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Soler. I'm not trying to interrupt you, but it is 7:45. We've now had almost 40 minutes of on 2 5-minute presentations. I just want to make sure we're all free to get additional information from Modo directly and pieces. So I don't want to spend more time than we have to here. We have a motion on the floor to seek some more information in more detail. But I have hands up from multiple councillors, so I can just ask you to be direct with your questions and direct with your answers, and we'll move through this very quickly. Councillor Patterson, please go next.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Soler, for your presentation. I've used car shares in some of the larger cities of in Canada, so I'm quite familiar with them. Could you just briefly tell me about a couple of things? One thing that I noticed in your presentation talked about the opportunity to align policies with the OCP. And one was speaking about restricting the parking of a commercial vehicle on private property. Could you briefly tell me what that means precisely in the form that you put it there?
Thank you, Councilor. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the question. So that we mean, for instance, that if we were to work with a property owner, Strata Corporation, where they would be willing to make available a parking space to Modo, which is a commercial vehicle, in the sense that it's owned by a cooperative, it would be, per the bylaw, it would be restricted. And so we wouldn't be able to offer the service if the vehicle is located on such property.
Thank you. I think the bylaw is actually in the front of the building is the limitation in our bylaws, but I'm not sure about the multifamily. But we'll get those details from the staff report if the motion passes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead,
That's why I wanted to just ask that question to help inform some of the information that will come back from staff. The other piece of information, Mr. Solaire, if you could again just touch briefly on how Modo manages safety and maintenance issues for the cars to ensure that anybody who's using the vehicle is actually picking up a vehicle that is left in safe, operable condition and roadworthiness.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a team of fleet technicians that are looking after our vehicles, and we're working with dealerships and repair shops and keeping the vehicles up to manufacturer standards when it comes to maintenance and repairs. And all vehicles are insured through a fleet plan from ICBC with $5 million third-party liability. So all the vehicles are really looked after, really at the top level, I would say, by professionals.
Thank you. I think it answers the question.
Yeah.
Councilor Patterson, anything else?
No, Mayor, I will leave any other information I trust will come back as a part of staff's report on this.
Thank you. I have Councilor Ney and then Councilor Zelka.
You're going to like my answer, Mr. Mayor. My questions have been answered, so I'll forgo the question. Okay.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councilor Zelka.
Very quickly, thank you, Chair. From one of the websites that talks about car shares, it suggests that the average car cost is about $10,000 per year, and the car sharing cost is approximately $1,500 or $1,500 per year. With that obvious financial incentive to do car share, why is the take up so low in this area, please?
Because people have grown accustomed and are dependent on personal vehicles. As soon as it becomes easy for someone and convenient, however they define convenience, once it becomes convenient for them to do most of their trips without the use of a vehicle, then car sharing becomes a lot more relevant. And a lot of people do not really appreciate how expensive owning a vehicle is. Very often they simply think insurance and gas and repairs. But they forget to factor depreciation, which is the number one. So behaviors and a lack of, I would say, maybe rational thinking when it comes to cost. That I would say these are the two main reasons. So some education and then some improvements in terms of transportation networks would be able to increase uptake.
If I may, one more quick question, please, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The age to rent a car in BC is, I believe, 21 years. And then there's also a surcharge if you're less than 25, an additional charge. Is there similar types of charges and limitations for cars?
No. Someone can join when they're 18 with an N license or full license. You can even have the learning license and start driving with Modo, provided that you're with an authorized driver.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on this to refer this to staff report on the three suggestions given. Are there any other discussions on that motion? I do not see any, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And then we have a motion to receive, moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion? And I just want to make sure, sometimes it's hard to catch Councillor Green's hand in the background. I just want to make sure, did you want to speak to anything else? No, enough for voting, for just speaking. No, you're okay. All right, I'll call the question then a receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Solaire, for your time this evening. Certainly, we do see the Modo cars around the municipality, and they serve a wonderful purpose. And so we look forward to seeing what else can be done to enhance as we do all the multimodal work. This is one piece of that puzzle, and really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you again.
All right, thank you. I'm going to just open up if anybody has called in, going back to item number 3, where we have public comments and questions. not for items on the agenda, but just of other items. I will take those now. You can hit *9 if you're on the phone to raise your hand, and we'll take that call. If not, we'll just move on to the next items on the agenda. I don't see any hands popping up, so I will then come to the Ms. Morden. I just want to make sure I haven't forgotten anything or missed anyone here. Can you just confirm that nobody else has indicated they wish to speak from the public on the public input section?
Not that I'm seeing, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So then we're going to move on to item number 6.1. This is Mayor and Council verbal reports. Just really a chance for members of council, if they want to update the other members of council on work that's been undertaken at other committees or commissions that they think the council might be interested in, then this is a chance to do it. So I'm going to go in the order I see on my screen, if that's okay. So I have Councillor Green at the top left of my corner, and then I'll have Patterson Appleton.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just that I've attended the first Tourism Committee meeting of the year this month, and then a TTAC meeting this morning. Yes, those are the main meetings that I've been involved in this month, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Patterson, then Appleton, then Braithwaite, then Zelka, then Ney.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to let people know that Victoria Family Court Youth Justice Committee will be holding its annual general meeting on January 19th. Certainly one of the topics that is foremost at that meeting will be the review that was undertaken at the request of the CRD for the committee to become a delegated authority committee of the CRD. And so pending decisions and discussion at that meeting, I will be coming forward with my recommendations to council for how we consider selecting a participation representative from the District of Oak Bay. That's all I have to report on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Appleton, then Braithwaite, Zelka, then Ney. So go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was pleased to attend the Heritage Foundation meeting on January the 11th. The Heritage Commission meets tomorrow, actually, to discuss and finalize work plan elements and other important business for the year. So we're one day early for a report out on that significant meeting. So looking forward to attending that. Similarly, the Greater Victoria Public Library has not met as yet this month, but I will take this opportunity to inform council and the community that due to considerations from COVID, like a lot of organizations and other factors, that the community may have noticed that many GVPL branches are operating on reduced hours or modified hours for the month of January. And so that they're targeting those hours and those areas where people are the most. So to ensure that there's the maximum availability for those times where the people need them the most, but they are modifying as they go along, and that's going to be revisited at the end of January. So I just ask the council and the community to sort of keep an eye on GVPL's very active social media and web presence. As changes are made, those things are announced well in advance and broadcast to the community. But folks should just be aware of that. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I have Braithwaite, Zelka, Ney. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the tourism meeting with Councillor Green, and none of the other committees that I'm involved with have met yet this month.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. The Capital Regional District Greater Water Supply Commission is meeting on Wednesday. And just wanted to remind Oak Bay citizens that the pH and corrosion study report is available for those who are interested in wanting to learn more about the quality of the water. Plus, the water quality summary reports are out, and there was a small lingering Oak Bay issue that has been completely resolved. I am still continuing to monitor Oak Bay issues with respect to water quality, and I've do encourage the public to go and check out these fascinating reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I will keep mine very brief. First of all, the CRD, just want to make council aware there is a Performing Arts Facilities Select Committee, which is looking at the potential of doing regional arts facilities and how to manage that in either a regional or sub-regional fashion. It's quite difficult to get approvals under various mechanisms allowed by law. So we're just undertaking that review about what options might be put forward. Because the board has indicated a sub-regional preference, but it makes it difficult to move some of that forward. I did attend the Provincial Urban Deer Advisory Committee meeting in December, and that was well. I had to recuse myself for the Oak Bay ask, but that was in fact later on approved. So with that, the grant will make a formal announcement. But it was interesting conversation because we got into with some new provincial leadership on there, quite an interesting discussion around how we manage deer and how we create a better using that committee better as a feedback loop to the province in terms of how effective their programs are for municipalities. It started out that way and it sort of morphed into more of a granting body, and we're trying to look at some ways of moving it back. So we'll see how that goes, but I think it's an important step for the longevity of that program. This is sort of the month or a couple of months of police board stuff. I was engaged with the Canadian Association of Police Boards nationally as part of a leadership committee to look at governance nationally and lessons learned for governance across the country. I continue to serve on the BC Association of Police Boards, and then we're having a meeting this week on a number of regional issues as well as the UBCM Public Safety Committee. And then I just want to let people know if people are interested in serving on the Oak Bay Police Board, the official ask is passed, but you can still apply through Cabro. We'll be having another opening coming up shortly, and we haven't had that selection yet, but really would invite people to, if they're interested in serving on the police board, to still take that opportunity to put their names in early for that. That summarizes my my short, brief notes on items underway. So with that, unless there's any other, sometimes we have remember things at the last minute here. I don't see any other hands popping up, so I'm ready to move on to the next agenda item. We're on to moving on to number section 7. We have 2 items today, 7.1, 7.2. Both of these are available for public input, and so we would, and if people wish to speak, I'll make that call at the appropriate time. If you wish to speak on those items, I would, particularly 7.1 as we're going to get to first, call the 1855 number. If you're doing the live stream that's showing on your screen, enter the ID and passcode, and then you can hit *9 to raise your hand. And when we get to the public input portion of this piece, I will call on you on the screen. So again, if you wish to speak to us and you're watching on the live stream, please call the 1855 number, enter the ID and passcode on the screen, and hit the *9. Or if it's not on the screen, the ID and passcode may just be on the agenda. Select it there and then hit *9 to raise your hand. So with that, we have Ms. Morden here to introduce some alternatives and ideas for Public Art Advisory Committee. And I'm just going to go straight to Ms. Morden at this time. Welcome, Ms. Morden. And Ms. Morden for the publics is the Deputy Director, or the, is it Mr. Meikle is speaking to this?
That's okay, Your Worship. I actually will introduce the item, but with your indulgence, pass it over to Mr. Meikle partway through.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ms. Morden. So welcome.
Great, thank you. So Council completed the 1-year review of the committee and commission policy back in November of 2021. At the time, Council opted to take a little more time to consider the operational challenges and just some of the legislative limitations that were raised regarding the Public Art Advisory Committee, as well as consideration of the possibility of creating a combined Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee moving forward. So that matter was deferred to a future committee of the whole meeting back in November. Then in December, Council requested a companion memo from staff to outline a range of possible alternatives to the Public Art Advisory Committee that would facilitate that ongoing volunteer engagement in community arts and culture programs in other ways. So staff have now completed that exercise and are pleased to bring this matter forward this evening. As noted in the report, we are seeking direction on 2 aspects. First, Council's preferred structure for an advisory body, whether that is a Parks and Recreation Committee or a Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee. And then second, Council's preferred model for engaging volunteers in public arts and culture programs moving forward. Staff's recommendation regarding the advisory body structure remains a combined Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee, which would have within its mandate to review and respond to council referrals on arts-related matters, as well as a more formalized relationship with the Arts Laureate. The details of that relationship would be proposed through the development of draft terms of reference for council's consideration in the coming weeks. Arts and culture programs, including Arts Laureates projects, would be further supported through a volunteer program designed to enable a more hands-on volunteer experience, not subject to the open meeting requirements that apply to advisory committees through the community charter. So Mr. Meikle has outlined some of those options for you, and at this point, I'd be happy to pass it over to him if that's appropriate.
It's of course appropriate. Welcome, Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to ensure that you can hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the introduction there. So I'll speak, as Sarah mentioned, more to the options of the models of volunteerism for arts and culture. Just to preface this, in developing these options, we looked at the existing volunteer opportunities within Oak Bay Parks, Rec and Culture, as well as general volunteering models in other communities. We also took a look at volunteer organizations and their structures that exist in other communities, which support the delivery of arts and culture initiatives in general. Along with this, we considered the plans for events and activities for 2022 and beyond specifically for Oak Bay Parks, Rec and Culture, as was informed by the 2021 Public Arts Advisory Committee members. And this, of course, is all should the pandemic health restrictions allow for future events, etc. So, for example, within 2022, we are in the process of starting another rendition of the Arts Alive public sculpture display program for this summer. We have scheduled Willows Park concerts again for this summer. We are looking to offer further opportunities with the public outdoor painted pianos. And we are looking at options to work with the library to offer at least one, if not a series of storytelling events in the community. So with this information in mind, we've presented three of the most kind of common models for volunteer engagement and involvement in recreation, arts, and culture activities. And these are generally categorized into these three options. So option A is recruiting and supporting event-specific volunteers. So these are generally shorter term opportunities focused on specific projects or events. This can involve positions from organizing events to more hands-on roles on the day of an event, for example. Volunteer position descriptions would be developed specific to each project or to each event. An advantage here is generally that these are a shorter term commitment, which often works for many citizens in their busy lives these days. Option B is the formation of a volunteer arts team. And this is essentially modeled after similar teams of volunteers in the emergency program, for example, or in the park's invasive species removal programs. In this model, a core group of volunteers would be recruited to fulfill volunteer roles, covering the full spectrum of projects or events throughout a one-year term, for example, could be a 1 or 2 year term we've seen. So this tends to involve a greater commitment level, but it may also involve a higher level of engagement for volunteers in terms of planning and organizing events than you might see in option A, for example. And option C is really dependent upon the action and initiative of citizens to form a not-for-profit organization or a separate organization. In most other communities where we see this, it's commonly called an arts council. These organizations operate as their own entity. However, they're generally seen to partner with and work with and are supported by the district to offer arts and culture events and programs for the community. And the support from the district can take a number of forms, from in-kind support in terms of staff resources and or equipment resources, or to applications for grant and aid type support. As well, and of course, staff await another direction from council here, and I'm open to any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meikle. I do anticipate a number of questions as we go through this because it's there's a lot of nuance here in terms of how things could get implemented. But thank you very much for that overview of the report. We'll go with questions first, just so those in attendance know. We typically go to council for questions for clarification. We will then go to the public for any additional comments or questions that they wish to bring, and then back to council at that point for motions and direction and debate on possible direction. So that's the order we're going to go through this. So if I can invite members of council to ask questions to clarify the options in front of us, that would be appropriate. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Meikle, thank you, and Ms. Morden, thank you for the presentation. I think it has been apparent through being involved with this committee over the last little while that it has been hard for the committee to work within the open meeting requirements. So it's great to see some of these options that are on the table. I am looking at the costs associated with some of the options. So I'm assuming, Mr. Meikle, that these costs are over and above what we already have in place for the arts and culture programmer. Is that correct?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Braithwaite. Yes, that is a correct assumption. We currently have budgeted for a part-time 17.5 hour arts and culture programmer position, and it's approximately $40,000 per year, including benefits. So the estimates are based on some additional hours for that position to administer a volunteer program, as well as some costs in advertising and other messaging, et cetera, that would be necessary to support a volunteer program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we did go with the Community Arts Council, I looked at those with interest, that the other municipalities have done that. Would the Community Arts Council themselves have to pay for events within the municipality and for the insurance to hold those events within the municipality?
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Braithwaite again. Generally, the answer would be yes. It is somewhat dependent on the type of event and the kind of partnership that was formed between the organization and the district. There are certainly examples where in a partnership model working with the district that the costs, for example, for park permits may be waived and or insurance requirements may be met through that partnership. If generally what I've seen out there in other communities, if the Arts Council themselves are running an event themselves on their own, then yes, they would require their own insurance, and certainly for their own protection in these cases, that would be advisable.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
My last question would be, if they were a Community Arts Council, then they would be able to apply for funding that we cannot, as they sit underneath us as a committee of council. Is that correct? So they could actually apply to the CRD Arts granting process.
Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council. Yes, that is my understanding, and we have had an example of that in the past, whereby for the mural project on the side of the Public Works building, the district themselves were not able to apply for a grant for that project. However, working with the Oak Bay Community Artists Society, they were able to apply for a grant with the CRD Arts granting program there. So that example has been seen in the past, and it really depends on the individual grant opportunities, but tends to be in the arts and culture realm that most of those grants are focused for not-for-profit organizations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it on. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Green, did I see your hand go up as well?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Why don't you go next, and then I'll go to Councillor Patterson in Appleton. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Meikle and Ms. Morden, thank you very much for a great report. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Meikle, I too am sort of leaning in the direction of the Arts Council concept. Just one question. How would that affect, or it may not, the Arts Alive program? I have had some people express concern about the future of the Arts Alive program, and I think arts generally and these voices were talking about ensuring that there is momentum, continuous momentum for this program, but also for arts generally in Oak Bay. Do you see the Arts Council as a viable option related to things like Arts Alive and other activities as well? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Councillor Green. Yes, absolutely. That an Arts Council would be a potentially wonderful partner in a program such as the Arts Alive program. It would really be up to their purview, their planning as to whether that was a project they wish to be involved with. There certainly are options within staff complement to look at how we carry on and continue with that program. And in fact, that is the current model we'll be looking at for continuing the Arts Alive sculpture program for 2022 in the absence of a committee and group of volunteers at this particular moment. So we are looking at how we do that into the future. But absolutely, there would be a role and would be potentially a wonderful partnership opportunity there.
Thank you. And just one more quick question, Mayor, if I may. Mr. Meikle, in terms of costing and support for something like an Arts Council, and you've quoted some figures here, et cetera, but in terms of staff time and cost, how would that compare to the previous model that we've had up until more recently? Is that, it appears to me it might be a reduction in the amount of staff time and in terms of cost, and I'm not sure, but if you could just let me know your views on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Green. It is a little difficult to ascertain that exactly in comparison to the past model that existed in the district here. Again, we had wonderful volunteers that put in a great deal of time and effort into the arts programs in history here, and so it really would vary there and depend on the level of commitment of members of that Arts Council themselves. Generally, what I've seen with other arts councils in other communities is that, yes, there tends to be a little less requirement staff resource-wise, although following an experience and in a discussion with the Esquimalt, whose Arts Council is relatively new, it sort of follows along with our similar arts program here in Oak Bay within the last 5 to 7 years. There's often more initial support required in the first couple of years as the Arts Council themselves get up and running, and staff can offer and facilitate and provide some other resources in those initial first few years. So that's again part of the challenge in estimating exactly how those cost comparisons are made.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Patterson, Appleton, the nay for questions.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Morton and Mr. Meikle for the presentation and the range of options that you presented. It's a lot to absorb in all of this. If I also, like the previous councillors, lean towards an Arts Council. Just for clarification, though, the way this would be set up, then it would be operated more as a society, and not unusual. Arts councils are generally comprised of knowledgeable local experts and people that are engaged actively with art and interested in art. But there's always the administrative functions that come with running a society type function. And so was the intent then that this would be its own body? And so along with the all of the very informed and knowledgeable work that they will be doing in running a great arts program for the district, they would be then solely responsible for the administrative functions also or would there be assistance in any way through the district? How arm's length does the district have to be in staying away from things like managing the accounts, the bank accounts, and that type of thing? Could you just speak to that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. This may fall more into Mr. Morden's bailiwick, so I'll give you the chance first, Ms. Morden, to answer that question, and then Mr. Meikle, if he wishes to add anything.
Thanks, Your Worship. What I would probably envision is something similar to how the Heritage Foundation came to be established, in terms of there'd be some support from staff in the beginning to get that framework established and registered and a clear understanding of the requirements. But at this point, the administration of the Heritage Foundation in terms of annual general meetings and minutes, and it's pretty much managed by the foundation. So we would be looking for that handoff. Of course, we are always available and happy to answer questions and provide clarification as needed to the best of our ability, or to connect them with the knowledgeable resources in the province as well. In terms of the financial piece, I think I would probably want to get back to you on that after having a conversation with Mr. Payne on some considerations there.
Understandable. Mayor, if I may just continue with another brief question. Again, to that end of the actual administrative process of managing this, with the Heritage Foundation, the district council is responsible for appointments to the Heritage Foundation. Would that be the same intent then with the arts group that is formed? Would that be the same intent? How would that be managed so that the district, I guess, is connected indirect, perhaps less directly than it is now, but not the relationship is not so distant that that we can't have some voice in what goes on and ensure perhaps continuity.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Ms. Morden, I'll give that to you first.
Sure, thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Meikle can correct me if he thinks I'm incorrect here, but I think what we would do is look to the other Arts Council models and what the relationship there is with the municipalities, how that reporting occurs, how the membership is comprised, directors appointed. We would probably, I'm thinking there's probably quite a few similarities between those models, and so we would want to mirror ourselves after some of those models that Mr. Meikle has highlighted.
Sure, Mr. Meikle, can you talk to the other jurisdictions and how they appoint or don't appoint? In many cases, I'm sure their community arts councils.
Thank you, Your Worship. Generally, I have not seen many models that have district appointed or municipality appointed directors and members to an arts council. Although that's not to say that doesn't exist out there. It tends to be more of a, I suppose, for lack of a better term, a grassroots organization that is formed by interested members, interested citizens, and people offer their services, offer their volunteer time to join that organization. There are certainly options of how the planning and activities are reported out, especially if there are grants and aid involved, and those kinds of reporting mechanisms can be created.
Thank you. Councilor Patterson.
Thank you. And yes, just one last question, Mayor, if I may, and I'm not sure if it's Mr. Meikle or Ms. Morden that can speak to this, but generally, overall, I think the response in the community to the arts program in the District of Oak Bay it's been one that the arts program has been enjoyed and really embraced by the community. However, there have been on occasions pieces that are a little more controversial, and so with an arm's length committee formed to in fact handle the arts in culture in Oak Bay, and perhaps staff have learned something in looking at other districts and what they do on how that part of the relationship is managed when when the committee is in fact making decisions about art that the community may have an opinion about. Who is responsible to, I guess, basically be the facilitator of any discussions to that end. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Meikle, and your any to that issue in terms of signing off on art or other aspects?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Patterson. It would depend on the type of program or activity, and I think judging by what Councillor Patterson was referring to, we're generally speaking of public art installations in this case, and so couple of thoughts there. If public art is to be installed on municipal land, parkland, etc., or municipally owned properties, then there certainly is an approval mechanism that would come to council in those cases. In terms of a jury process for selecting various pieces of art or for selecting sculptures, for example, as in the past, there really wasn't a mechanism for, and my understanding is council did not wish to be speaking to the actual content, so to speak, of the art itself, and had left that to a jury process and a jury of volunteers and of artists, which of course an arts council generally is made up of and would provide you with that expert level jury members to be a part of that. So I think it's in separating that piece of, council in their past has not expressed a desire to comment on and or to pass judgment, so to speak, to jury the pieces of art themselves, as opposed to approving where the art lands on municipal property.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. No further questions from me.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have Councillor Appleton, then Nathan Zelka.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the substance of my question, I think, has already been addressed to a certain extent, but maybe just pick it up. I appreciate Ms. Morden's comments on the extent to which the structure of the Oak Bay Heritage Foundation might assist with this process, in the sense that there's a Heritage Foundation which exists at a greater distance and does not obviously fall within the same reporting and meeting requirements as the Heritage Commission does, which was sort of a key outcome coming out of the Community Commission review. And this may not be something that staff are in a position to answer, but I'm just wondering, given that we've discussed, I too lean in the direction of the Arts Council model, and that council has a limited ability to, again, that would be grassroots information. I'm just wondering whether staff could comment a little bit further about how the experience of and sort of the application of the current Oak Bay Heritage Foundation might be informative in how we created, how we could afford some structure and some support to the community to. You can't ask somebody to create a council; they have to create it themselves. But in what way can we create a fertile environment for the community to be able to take that on? I guess, and that's a bit of a reach. Staff may not necessarily be in a position to answer that, but that's just what I'm curious about. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Ms. Morden?
Sure, thanks, Your Worship. If the Arts Council is the model that council is thinking is preferred at this point, we had anticipated in 2022 some activities to promote the concept to past and current PAC members, community organization, just to kind of stimulate the interest and possibly some action on the formation of an Arts Council. Certainly through that, we could communicate that there would be support and resources available through corporate services to navigate some of those pieces as far as forming a nonprofit society. I know there's several steps to go through. I have been through them a few times myself in my volunteer life, and I know Ms. Williams has as well. So we'd certainly be available to help navigate and assist with that. Does that answer the question?
Councillor Appleton? Or?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that I think it does. I guess I just wanted to clarify just if as per Ms. Morden's comments, but in the other way around, I didn't want us to, if the will of council or if the preference of council was to go in that direction, I guess I just wanted to hear confirmation, which I think I've heard from staff, that there would be some availability on behalf of staff, corporate services, and others to be able to afford some support in that regard, and that it wouldn't sort of constitute a separate consideration for resourcing that we would have to include in the upcoming budget process. So what I'm hearing, and I guess staff can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they've already anticipated this, and that there is some ability for staff to support and present options to the community if they choose to go in that direction. Is that what I'm hearing?
Ms. Morden?
Yes, correct. That is what you're hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have the Councillor Ney, then Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I had two parts to the question. I thank you, Councillor Appleton, for asking that question and affirming that. I had a sense that I'm leaning towards this art council. I like the grassroots autonomy of it and see what comes out of that. But I the way it was described, I was concerned about the front end support. So that's been addressed. The other issue I was just going to bring there to staff, I just curious. So we haven't got our arts laureate in place since Barb Adams has left the post, and but when that does happen, what is the sort of governance relationship of the arts laureate if the will of the council was to support an arts council? How would that work in terms of, responsibility, who speaks, who how that, is it a partnership? Is it, do they work together independently? Has there been some thought about, or is the arts laureate expected to be part of that council or independent? How would that work?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. And ultimately, I think that's going to be probably our call, but I think I'm sure Mr. Meikle has thought a little bit about how that role might work.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Ney. There's, as you mentioned, there certainly are some options there available in how that relationship could work. Generally, the arts laureate would be more connected, I suppose you could say, or an agent, if you like, of the district, and would be a liaison with that arts council. Generally, what we see, as we saw in the past, the arts laureate would have an ability to initiate or to pursue their own, so to speak, their own initiatives in arts and culture programs, events, projects, etc. And would certainly have that opportunity to work quite closely with an arts council to move some of those initiatives, projects, events forward within the community. So certainly a couple of pieces there. And in consideration, and the arts laureate, I would propose, would also be connected to, for example, a Parks, Recreation and Culture advisory body as well. So there are a couple avenues for connection and liaison there, but I would see the arts laureate being more connected and an agent, so to speak, to use that term loosely, of the district, whereas the Arts Council is their own entity and they'd be working in partnership together.
Thank you, Mr. Meikle. Councillor Ney.
Thank you. No, that's food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very interesting sort of dilemma to look at in terms of how to organize the process going forward. And I very much appreciate staff bringing forward the various ideas. A bit of a complicated process to follow with all of the different permutations and combinations. And I feel with drilling down into legislation, I now know how many angels dance on the head of a pin. So thank you so much for drilling so deeply. It seems to be Oak Bay's tradition to have maybe some sort of arm's length sort of thing with a linchpin organizer. And I think of, for example, the Heritage Foundation, the Oak Bay Emergency Program. The Monterey Center that's run, or at least is advised by the Monterey Recreation Activities Association, an arm's length association that allows certain policies over there, which I don't think our law allows, but it does allow private organizations to have those policies. Very helpful to the district. And then I even think of, for example, the Yes Awards. Very strongly run Lynchpin organizations. Now, none of these organizations, I have any idea how they operate, to tell you the truth. And even as a counselor, I'm still scratching my head how some of these things are organized. But I must say that by having a Lynchpin organizer pull everything together, these programs are excellent. And we have had such excellent results from our Arts Laureate in the past that I certainly wouldn't want to see that drift away, as it seems to have over the last year, and as mentioned in the staff report, where some of the satisfactory and even some of the resignations have come forward. So one of the concerns I'm noticing is that if we organize too closely, I would have used a different word, maybe starting with the letter A, then we may create a situation where it's just not worth it for volunteers to participate because they have no room, and there's no room for innovation like we have in many of our other programs. So with this as a sort of a preface, a question I would have through you, Chair, to staff is, first of all, the Arts Laureate. I know you mentioned that you sort of gave some indication sort of whether it's an arm of this or an arm of that, but would it stand between the Parks, Rec and Culture Committee, maybe the combined committee that I would prefer, or would it be really an arm of this potential separate council? I know you touched upon it a bit, but I just wanted some clarification. And how is this whole thing funded? So I'll just sort of start with those two sort of A and B aspects of the first question.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Meikle, the question of the alliance and the funding.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Zelka. Again, there'd be some options presented to Council in the future in terms of more specific terms of reference for an Arts Laureate, specifying some of the roles and responsibilities. I would envision that that role is likely connected, I would say, I guess, more closely to a Parks, Rec and Culture Advisory Committee, if that's the direction Council wishes to go. As again, the Arts Laureate generally is seen as an extension of a part of the district processes or delivery of arts and culture initiatives and projects in the community, and then would be that individual perhaps to liaise with the Arts Council through the Parks, Rec and Culture Advisory Committee. So you're creating that link between those organizations. Again, this is all a bit speculative, and options would be brought forward to Council to provide a little more clarity around what that Arts Laureate role would look like. We certainly have some foundation from the past to look at and work from, as you mentioned, in terms of the excellent delivery of initiatives there. And I think we're just looking at how we expand that further into the community. So it provides a nice platform for that connection to be made, in my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meikle. Ms. Morgan, do you wish to add something to Mr. Meikle's comments?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to add very briefly that we heard loud and clear that the advisory body model was very restrictive for the type of volunteerism we're looking to engage in the arts. We are through our recommendations tonight trying to create that space for that creativity to occur. We do know that the Arts Laureate position remains a very high priority. I think part of our issue in filling that position over this past year, besides pandemic, has been that we were really wrestling with what that advisory body structure was going to look like moving forward, and how we were going to address those challenges and concerns that we were hearing. So just wanted to mention that, just a quick add-on.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. I'll leave the question of how the dollars flow to, I guess, I presume a report will come back, drilling down a bit deeper in this aspect. But I do want to ask just some fundamental questions. Assuming we go with an Arts Council, hopefully we're large enough to be able to support that with the interest that we have here. Who would own the artworks? who would maintain the artworks. And I presume at times we have issued tax receipts for artistic donations, who would issue the tax receipts.
Mr. Meikle, perhaps you can touch on that. I'm not sure those aspects would change much under this model. Perhaps you can clarify.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Zelka. I'm not exactly sure. To be fair, that would be an element I would need to delve into a little further. On the surface, I would say I don't believe that it needs to change from the current model. Again, some of that would depend on the plans and initiatives that the Arts Council chose to take on themselves. What we tend to see more often with the arts councils are more events, projects, initiatives to involve community in the arts, whereas the actual purchase of public art for display within a community still lies with the district. But there are varying models out there. So, but that's again one example of how things may work, and that the actual purchase of and ownership over the public art still lies with the district.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. This is the opportunity for public just to speak to us. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions as people go about the process of raising their hands. If you're watching the live stream, you can call into the 1-855 number using the, it's published in the agenda package. It's published at the beginning of the agenda package, so it should be easy to find. Once you're in with the user ID and passcode, you would hit *9 to raise your hand if you wish to address council on this matter. So I will go to the public in just a minute. If you're in the Zoom call yourself, you may also use the reactions tab and raise your hand within the Zoom app, and I will also call on you there. My questions are very straightforward, but just for absolute clarification, the intention here, as I understand it, Mr. Meikle, is the Arts Alive program, as has been run for multiple years and initiated by the former Arts Laureate, that is intended to continue and indeed expand. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is indeed planned to continue. Expansion will really depend on level of sponsorship we're able to achieve in the community. So at this time, we are hoping to continue it into 2022, and then once pandemic changes, hopefully in the future, we can carry on with potential expansion of that program at council's discretion and approval.
Great, thank you. And same with the Arts Laureate. That at this point, we're absolutely expecting to continue that program as part of this as well, but details to be determined.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That is the plan at this time. Again, details to come forward in terms of what a terms of reference would look like there, and how recruitment goes into the future there.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the other questions I had here really have been asked and answered. I think we're struggling to find a model that allows for the nimbleness allocated by such an arm's length committee that isn't sort of under the Local Government Act regulations for advisory bodies, but still allows for appropriate funding and expertise to advise on our arts. I guess I may just leave the questions at this point and move to the public and then come back as we move forward. I guess the only other thing I just want some clarification on is, again, I think I know the answer to this, but just for absolute clarification, there are many functions, at least in normal times, that go forward. You mentioned some of them at the beginning, things like the Music in the Park. We've had movies, community movie events in the park, those sorts of things. Those are still expected to continue and really fall under the culture aspect of the Parks, Rec and Culture department. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. We do have within our operating budget, as we'll be coming forward here, as I mentioned, a part-time arts and culture programmer who looks after organizing those events and activities. There is a number of those events and activities that have existed and do exist within the purview of the service delivery of the district, same way as other recreation programs exist within the purview of staffing of the district and within our operating budget.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Having gone through council for questions, I am going to turn to members of the public. So I have one that says Teresa's iPad. Perhaps if you could just unmute yourself, you can speak to council. And then I believe, I think Ms. Adams wishes to speak as well, but I don't see a hand up yet. So go ahead, Teresa's iPad, if you could just give your name and municipality of residence, and then feel free to address council.
Hello, it's Teresa Price here, past chair of the PAC. Thank you. I just learned about this afternoon, so I'm not completely prepared to discuss in detail, but just very briefly, I'm not sure, grassroots is grassroots, and I want you to know that this idea came up actually, the idea of establishing some sort of nonprofit that had flexibility and ability for partnership and ability to apply for grants was one that we had started to discuss last spring. So it's not a new idea, and it's one that actually I've started to work on and mentioned to a couple of people, talked also to some important possible community partners and associations that we wouldn't want to tread on their toes. So that process has already started a little bit, and I will be talking to staff members about what I've learned. I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that Oka Bay still needs some sort of citizen involvement in things arts-wise. I'm putting aside the Arts Laureate program, which is, I think, a separate. I think it is still useful for you to have an A or a B volunteer team that can assist you in some way, whether it's making decisions, art decisions, or trying to find a mechanism to work through to get community feedback and consultation. So I'm not sure that it should be A or B or C. It might actually be a combination of all three that could be useful to you. I do caution, like, a grassroots group is a grassroots group, and it is it'll be interesting to see how a partnership could develop from it. I think it would be great if there's ways that the municipality could provide, quote, fertile ground for this to grow a little bit further. And I'm sure there's ways that could be worked out in order to make that partnership really strong and the communication and consultation really strong. But there are some really, really interesting models and some really successful models. We just need to find the people who are enthusiastic and have the time and the resources to be able to do it. So I just want to let you know, please don't think that you have to have one or the other. You can have several. And I think there is high interest in in helping specifically, not necessarily with the process, but with the events and the art itself. And I think that we could probably get together quite an interesting team that could support the municipality in that way. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Price. Appreciate your feedback on that. Mr. Meikle?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Price. Very much appreciate hearing from you here. I just wanted to remind council as well that part of this discussion is around the potential for or the option of a Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee, which would certainly have, if you like, members from the arts community as part of that advisory committee, and so would still provide an avenue, the advisory role, to council in that respect, and would have the arts and culture advisory role would sit within that committee. So don't want to lose sight of that is still an element there that to be considered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meikle. Ms. Adams, if you could just give your name and municipality of residence, although of course we know, and then feel free to address council, and welcome. You're muted at the moment.
Am I unmuted?
You are now. Yes, welcome.
Okay. Yes, thank you very, very much. I'm very interested in all the chat. I too just found out about this afternoon, so I haven't read the whole 44 pages of information. And looking at the three options, I tend to think that an arts council could be a good idea, but it is really not. And it would be wonderful to be supported by council, but I think that you also need a combination. I think the team, the B option, is a really good option if the council is going to carry on with an arts laureate. And the arts laureate, which is a conduit position, a position that brings everybody together. That's the bringing the community together, the sponsors, the arts clubs, all of the different aspects together. I think it would be a really good connector. And I think Steve said, Mr. Meikle said about using the arts laureate as a liaison with the council. But I agree with Teresa in that you can't really throw out you can't really move the arts laureate over to the arts council, because the arts laureate is part of the council. Is it a council appointment or a Parks, Recreation and Culture appointment? I'm not sure where the appointment would come from in your model, but I think that it would be I think a team that would work specifically to maintain or do the specific programs that and could be new ones, or they could be changed, they could evolve into something else, but the Arts Alive programs as they've been and the other things that have been started. So I'm really thrilled that so much work has gone into building up the arts again in the community, because it's been a little bit of a worry to me. I haven't wanted it to go just disappear, and I've had quite a few people from the community approach me to find out what's going on, and I've been out of the loop, as you might know, for the last year. So, but I'm willing to help out in when in some way to help get this back on the road if you need some help.
Great, thank you very much. And I will also always make a plug for things like if you want to know what's happening at council, it's hard for us to get in touch with everyone. There is a notification process. You can sign up, and then you get a little alert saying there's a new agenda, and you can scan it and see what's happening on the agenda package that day. So always worth doing. Always like having people coming out and talking to us who are involved in that. Thank you very much, Ms. Adams, for being here tonight and sharing. Obviously, you've got a center of knowledge and experience second to none on this particular subject. So thank you for being here. I don't see other hands raised from the public at this point. Ms. Morden, has anybody through the phone system indicated that they wish to speak?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Your Worship.
Okay, so with that, then I will come back to this table, and I guess I really have to turn back to staff to council. I would like to see, and I guess there's any follow-up questions, this is appropriate time to make them. And if people don't have questions, then I'd turn to council to give a motion that we can talk to and debate to move things forward. It seems to me there's three, maybe four distinct aspects of things that we have to consider here. One is just the staff impacts on and work that's going to be done. The idea of a committee of some sort in terms of advising. That's more of a municipal appointment model. That's considered the Arts Laureate position itself, which is not really for discussion tonight, but obviously plays into the model that we want to move forward. And then the liaison to the Community Arts Council. And I would just, as Ms. Price pointed out, of course, there are things like the Oak Bay Community Artists Society and many other existing not-for-profit or organized groups out there that do a lot of great work that we also want to make sure are engaged as we move things forward as well. So those and many others are potential. So I'm just going to turn to council at this point and see if we can get a motion on the table to speak to. I saw Councillor Ney, you had your hand up.
I'm not ready to make a motion right now, but I just had this thought after listening to the former arts laureate and chair of the arts committee, is that I'm not quite sure how this will all play out, because I'm just thinking of the way it was and the way we're moving forward, and just to be clear what we're gaining and what we're losing. So if we let go of like the arts kind of committee structure we had, my understanding of that committee was that it was really a support in sort of working through ideas and around initiatives and the planning of initiatives, and provided a real, if I'm correct, and we can go to the arts laureate, but that committee served as a very important support for the arts laureate to do the work in the community. And if we move to an arts council, that's a very, the relationship has yet to be seen, but my understanding is the way an arts council would work is they're looking to apply for funds for various projects. And it may or may not be to support the work of an arts laureate. And that may not matter to this council. I don't know. I'm just trying to get really clear and informed about what we're going to gain, but what we may lose. And I guess the issue with not having that sort of team to support the arts laureate, if the idea of a council might be that, but it might not be. But and we haven't got our arts laureate, so we don't know sort of the idea or the vision of the arts. Well, we have a fairly sketchy mandate here for our arts laureate, but we haven't got the individual who would bring their own vision and way of connecting with the community. So I guess I just don't feel, I'll be interested what others have to say about this, and maybe somebody feels more confident in putting a motion forward. But for me, there's a lot of, I understand why we brought these options before us, because as staff has explained to us, that it's hard to move forward with the arts laureate until we've got our structure in place. But it's also hard to figure out the arts laureate if it works the other way around as well. So I'll stop talking. I know you're looking for a motion, Mr. Mayor, so I'll defer to other councillors who may feel more clear-headed about how to move forward here.
Sure, thank you. I'm just trying to make procedurally move things along a little bit, but certainly questions are always in order. So feel free to ask questions. Any member of council. I have Councillor Appleton, Patterson, Braithwaite.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. So I just had a quick question, and then I might be in a position to forward a motion. But I guess with the understanding, the question for staff, with the understanding that such a decision is not necessarily resource neutral, that there are resource implications to deciding to go in that fashion, what we're hearing is that it may potentially take a little bit of time for a community arts council to crystallize, and that there may be some interest in creating a more structured option. So if we were, for instance, to go with option B as a volunteer team, that wouldn't necessarily preclude the community independently deciding to form an arts council structure of their own. I don't think that those two things have to be those things are not mutually exclusive.
I'm just going to put that to a question to Mr. Meikle, just to make sure we're clear. Mr. Meikle, is that your understanding?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Appleton. Yes, that would be my understanding. They certainly are not mutually exclusive and can coexist together quite happily. And in fact, in the longer term, it may be beneficial to have a so-called district owned, if you like, or district supported volunteer team that also helps support activities that the Arts Council themselves may want to put on. So that's sort of the longer term look at how those pieces may fit together. But and as Councillor Appleton has alluded to, in the short term, we may in fact need to bring on some volunteers for this summer in particular, depending on what we're allowed to do under the pandemic restrictions. And those volunteers may then support activities this summer while an arts council is naturally forming out there, so to speak.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. So that's very, very helpful, and I appreciate Mr. Meikle's comments. I take with great respect, and I place a fair bit of weight on the comments of Ms. Price and Ms. Adams having the lived experience with operating within the model, and I take their feedback very seriously. So. Given that I'm hearing that there is a reasonable degree of that there is a degree of support for a intermediate option, for want of a better word, something that affords some structure, but then also leaves options open for the future, I would be willing to move that council consider option B, the community arts volunteer team, as the structure for moving forward.
Second.
I'll second that.
So it's moved and seconded. So thank you, Councillor Appleton. I'm going to just, we have a motion live on the table here. So if it's okay with people, I'm going to start as moved and seconded, a new speaking order. Councillor Appleton, is there anything else you wish to add to motivate for that motion? Or are you comfortable?
Just very briefly, Your Worship. Again, I'm pleased to hear the support for this. I'm very, like I say, the comments of the former Arts Laureate and Chair are important here, because I feel like it's important for us to try to strike that balance between providing some structure from the district side of things and allowing the community the freedom that they've clearly indicated to us that they want to exercise. And the former Arts Laureate has communicated that this may be an appropriate structure that the Arts Laureate, the future Arts Laureate, could plug into. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Are there others who wish to speak to the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, and also to my colleagues, but especially to Ms. Price and Ms. Adams, because I think without their voices, I was leaning in the direction of an arts council, but I'm thinking now that perhaps given the feedback they provided to us tonight, that the hybrid model and the sort of intermediate model that Councillor Appleton has put forward is probably the best option at this point. I would also encourage us to perhaps tap the resources we currently have in the community, such as Ms. Price and Mrs. Adams, Barb Adams, to assist us in working out some of the details as well. And I really appreciate the staff report. I think the options were helpful. It certainly engendered some discussion, but I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. We've been just touching base here on the aspect of this, providing some of those supports. I just want to make sure we're absolutely clear on this through probably Ms. Morden. If we have this advisory or volunteer team, can we use that body as an adjudication body for existence example, or does that, because it would be advisory of council, trip us up in terms of our legal obligations of advisory bodies having to be public, et cetera? Perhaps you can just clarify to make sure that we're not moving down a path of advisory bodies that might trip us up. Ms. Morden?
Thanks, Your Worship. No, I don't see any issues there. Probably what we would do, I would envision, is a call specifically for volunteers for jury duty, I guess you would say. And so we would probably kind of lean into that team of volunteers that we had to say, hey, we're looking for, so many volunteers to Jury the Arts Alive program this year. We would convene that very separately from an advisory body structure. And so, no, I don't see that being a limitation at all.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Meikle, you had your hand up as well. Did you wish to add anything?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did wish just to highlight that the concern over adjudication and over a jury process was raised in the last year's structure of a Public Arts Advisory Council. The council, or the committee, sorry, struggled to see how we would have a jury process under the structure of an advisory committee. Very difficult to see how that's done in a public format in that manner. So we would have had to call for jury participants and call for other volunteers to be part of an adjudication process as it was.
That's helpful information as well. Thank you, Mr. Meikle. I don't have another speaking list here for the motion. So right now the motion is live on the table. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? I don't see any hands popping up. So I will prefer to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That passes. Thank you very much. I do need a motion to receive the report as well, if I could have that. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Is there anything else in terms of issues arising from this that people wish to give further clarification to? Councillor Appleton? Oh, Ms. Morden. I'll go to Ms. Morden first, then to Councillor Appleton.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sorry to interject. I just wanted to be clear that we would need direction on the structure for the advisory body as well, whether it's Parks and Recreation or you want to look at a Parks, Recreation and Culture advisory body.
Sorry, thank you for that. Councillor Appleton, you had your hand up first, and then I'll go to Councillor Braithwaite.
That was what thank you, Your Worship. That was what I was just going to point out. So, yeah, you should. I will leave it to my colleagues to have some discussion before a motion gets made, I would say.
Okay, we'll take questions or a motion. Either one is in order. Councillor Braithwaite.
Actually, I was going to make the motion. So if you don't mind, Councillor Appleton, unless you'd like to jump in and make a motion. Okay. I would move that we have a Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee.
Moved and seconded and thirded. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite. Anything you wish to add to that?
I just think that it's really important that we keep the culture in there. I think that it's been growing. The Parks, Recreation and Culture has been growing over the past few years. To go back to a Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, I don't really want to see us go in that direction. I want us to keep the culture in there. I think it's important to keep it in there.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Zulka.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking in support of the motion for the combined advisory committee. In a year of needing to rebuild, I think that this committee needs all the help it can get, this aspect of the committee. So maybe later on it could be split off again, but for now, I definitely combined makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just for my clarification on the motion as it stands here, then, Mr. Meikle or Ms. Morden, what this would look like essentially is this would be the official advisory body if formed that would cover Parks and Recreation as well as the cultural aspects related to in the community, but would not overlap or necessarily with the other motion given, which is a volunteer body to help with the adjudication and other community events. I just want to make sure we're absolutely clear in terms of what adding this separates the two responsibilities.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Yes, it would be two separate entities, I guess you could say. So the advisory body would be separate from the volunteer team. Having said that, we wouldn't place any eligibility restrictions if there were individuals that wanted to volunteer with the volunteer team and also be involved or apply for membership to the advisory body, that we would not limit that in any way.
Great, thank you very much for that clarification. Sorry, I don't know if there's any other hands, people that wish to speak to the motion. I do not see any, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That passes. Thank you very much. Ms. Morden, am I missing anything else here procedurally that we have to get through?
No, Your Worship, just to let you know that our next step would be to come back with draft terms of reference on that item.
Understand. With the terms of reference for the Parks, Rec and Culture Advisory Committee and the group and the Arts Laureate all come back together, or you anticipate those coming back separately?
Thanks for the question. We would probably be able to move the fastest on the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee. I'm thinking it didn't work very well to have the Arts Laureate terms of reference embedded within the Public Art Committee terms of reference. So I think we'll pull those two apart for your consideration. And then Mr. Meikle could speak to timing on the volunteer team and what might come back to council in terms of that effort.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Zelka?
If I may ask a question through you, Chair, with respect to Arts Alive, it'd be useful to know, I was thinking possibly approaching Ms. Adams after the meeting, but I might as well approach whoever is in charge of Arts Alive. Where are we at, and is there going to be a program happening this summer?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Meikle did touch on that at the beginning, but I'll go back to him again to articulate where we are in 2022, pandemic allowing for some of this. But go ahead, Mr. Meikle.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Zelka. It's a little bit of new ground for us in that the past iterations of the Arts Alive program has had the past iteration of the Public Arts Advisory Committee and the Arts Laureate to support us. So we are endeavoring staff-led process this rendition. So our first steps are to seek sponsors within the community, and we're just in the process of drafting a sponsorship letter and getting that out to the community. And then we will be, I'm sure no surprise to those community members that are with us here, we will be tapping some shoulders to hopefully help us in that process and sit on an adjudication or to sit on a jury for Arts Alive. And given timing, and we've been backed up in the Arts Alive process since the pandemic shutdown in 2020, really did have an impact on this program, and so our annual timelines are out of whack, so to speak. So we are regrouping a little bit and trying to fit things into a shorter timeline. So the plan and the hope would be to aim to have sculptures up for this summer, where in the past they may have been up in April. We're hoping to have those installed in late June, early July, and ready for July, August, September tours, etc. So that's the plan at this point. And as I say, first steps will be seeking some sponsors, and that will really dictate how many sculptures, how many artists we can support in that process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meikle. And I think worthy just to thank all the cooperation of all the artists who were so kind to allow us to continue a number of those works in the community during this time or last year with the pandemic wreaking havoc on our Parks, Rec, and Culture body. So thank you, my public body here. I'll just say that at large to my appreciation or our appreciation for that. Any other questions or comments on the motion? That's actually there's no more motions at hand, is there? We pretty much covered this. Any motions arising? Not seeing any. I'm ready to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much, everybody. I look forward to getting those detailed pieces back again. Councillor Braithwaite.
I'm sorry, did we have to move receipt of the report? I'm not sure. Or did we do that?
I believe it was already done, but I'll just turn to Ms. Morden to make sure. I think it was done prior to the last motion. Go ahead, Ms. Morden, to confirm.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was so engrossed in the conversation, I have to admit I did miss that. If Ms. McKean has that information, that would be much appreciated. I'm not sure, though, if she's unable to mute, but if she could text me, that would be appreciated.
I just don't remember it being on the table, but I could be wrong.
Yes, she has confirmed the report has not been received.
I'll move receipt. Yes.
Okay, let's move receipt. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on the receipt? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you for that. Moving on to item number 7.2, single-use plastics. And thanks again to all the public who came and provided information, Ms. Price and Ms. Adams. We got to 7.2, single-use plastics. Again, if you're watching the live stream, this is the time to call into the 1855 number that's on the agenda if you wish to address council. You have to enter the ID and passcode that's on the agenda and hit *9 to raise the hand. And we will see that here and be able to let you into the meeting and address council on this matter. But it is because of the time delay in over the live stream. It's best if you call in now, and we will get to you at the appropriate time in the meeting when we call on you. It should be probably a few minutes out. With that, I'm going to go to Ms. Morden, our Deputy Director of Corporate Services, to introduce this item.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll just shift gears here a little. So this report was from the November 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. However, some of the information changed very significantly in the interim with the publication of the Government of Canada's single-use plastics regulations on December 25th, 2021. So the purpose of the report remains, and that is to provide council with the results of the survey of licensed local businesses on this topic, and to check back in with council on related developments at the regional, provincial, and federal levels. So I'll cover the survey first. A letter of invitation that included a direct link to the online survey was mailed to all licensed local businesses in September. The survey was promoted through the district's various communications channels. An email reminder was sent on September 17th. And the Oak Bay Business Improvement Association helped to amplify our message through their weekly e-blast newsletter. As of the September 30th deadline, the district received 88 responses. A copy of the full survey results are attached to the report, and the analysis section highlights some of the key findings for council's consideration. The situational update highlights several key changes at the regional, provincial, and federal levels since staff last reported to council on this topic in May of last year. As noted in the report, both Saanich and Esquimalt have adopted checkout bag regulation bylaws similar to Victoria's, and Victoria concluded consultation on their single-use plastic short-term action plan. Provincially, an amended regulation under the Community Charter was announced in the summer. This amendment allows local governments to ban plastic checkout bags, polystyrene foam containers, and plastic utensils and stir sticks without seeking ministerial approval of those related bylaws. Finally, the most significant change at the federal level was the publication of the draft nationwide single-use plastic regulations. The proposed regulations would prohibit the manufacture, import, and sale of 6 categories of single-use plastics items: checkout bags, cutlery, food service ware made from problematic plastics, ring carriers, stir sticks, and straws, although there will be certain accessibility exceptions for straws. A 70-day comment period on the draft regulations is underway until March 4th, and implementation is scheduled to be phased in over 2 years, 2023 and 2024. So this report outlines 4 options for council's consideration. The publication of the draft federal regulations did trigger reconsideration at the staff level of these options, and staff are now recommending option 4, which includes having the federal government take that lead on regulations and enforcement, and the district possibly providing leadership on supporting their implementation based on what respondents to the local business survey indicated would be helpful. So that would include some public awareness and education activities and possible addition of recycling or compost infrastructure in commercial areas. Possible resolutions for each of the options are outlined in the options section beginning on page 9 of the report. And with any of the options, council may also wish to consider a district submission to the Government of Canada's public comment period, as well as a possible follow-up communication to local businesses to ensure they are aware of the proposed regulations and the opportunity for public comment. So that concludes my overview, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morden. And I'll turn to council for questions. After we have clarification questions of staff, we will go to the public for any additional comments or questions, and then back to this body for direction and debate. I have Councillor Braithwaite first. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to find my mute button there. Thanks very much, Ms. Morden. Really appreciate you bringing this forward. I'm thinking that there's a couple of things. would it be possible to, I mean, I see the benefit of waiting for option 4, but I really feel that we're really ready to move forward on some of this right now. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of doing something like having the option 1, where we're asking for the plastic bags, the single-use bags, to be banned, because I think that most of the businesses, my feeling is that most of the businesses within our area are kind of doing that anyhow, and just for us to really take a step forward and say, yes, let's support this. Let's ban single plastic bag use right now, and then perhaps look at the rest of option 4 and wait for the government to come out. Is it possible to do something like that?
Go ahead, Ms. Morton.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, it's absolutely possible. We do have some fantastic examples within the region of those bylaws. And certainly the piece regarding the change to the community charter regulations this summer makes the process a lot faster. We would no longer have to seek ministerial approval. So that is something that we could certainly manage within our work plans for this year. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And then I think another really big point that has become very apparent, and a lot of people approach me in regard to this, is the infrastructure for the recycling and compostable waste disposable receptacles. Is it possible that we could, and I seem to remember we've talked about this before, and maybe that we're adding something to do with this in our budget deliberations coming up, but is it possible to have that added into our budget so that we can start getting some of those receptacles on the street now, so that that we can start doing a little bit better job on the recycling?
Ms. Morton, I think the actual getting the things on the street is beyond Ms. Morton's ability to answer.
Oh, yeah.
But Ms. Morton, in terms of direction here today, perhaps you can just address some of those options available.
Sure, thanks, Your Worship. I would suggest we would probably need to refer that to the Director of Engineering and Public Works. I'm not sure if the CAO would like to weigh in on that one as well, possibly at this point.
Sure, thank you. And there is, right now the option 4 doesn't contemplate the possible addition of that. So I think the question would be, options for moving that up a little bit. Ms. Varela, is there anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. So respectfully, that would be outside of the scope of the report that's before Council. It's not just the receptacles, it's also the picking up and the sorting and constraints in the yard and staffing and trucks. So it's a much larger discussion that we could bring back to Council when time permits.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Sorry, just to go on that, Ms. Varela, if you don't mind, and I know this is it could be outside of what you're able to answer, but is that one of the reasons that we actually don't pick up soft plastics at curbside, is because of the sorting, etc.? Is that one of the reasons that we don't do that?
Probably, I'm not sure anybody attending tonight has the ability to answer that question.
Okay,
it is
no worries.
I can give a general answer in that the recycling is a CRD wide piece, and so they set the standards of what is collected and not collected for the most part within that curbside pickup. And so we're restricted by those restrictions, and we go above and beyond that in the drop off at the yard. But at this point, it's still a drop off service because that's not provided by the CRD.
Okay, thank you. And so when everybody else has spoken, I wouldn't mind seeing what everybody thinks about perhaps doing something with the single-use plastic bags now, and then perhaps looking at option 4 as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Are there? I'm just going to reach out to Councillor Green because you don't have the same hand up option. Did you wish do you have any questions at this time?
Not really. I guess I'm concerned. The only question I would have is if how prepared and ready our local BIA and business owners are. Are they plastic bag ready and ready to completely dispense with them? But I appreciate the comments of Councillor Braithwaite. I just want to make sure that we're not jumping too quickly without really knowing what we're getting into. And I think just the previous comments from Ms. Varela were were enlightening about. It sounds easy to say we'll do this, and then when you think of the operational and detail side, it's quite complicated. But I totally agree that it would be wonderful if we could act on this year. That would be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Green. I'm not sure if there was a question I can pass on in that piece, but I think points well made. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I very much appreciate the comments of my colleagues. I'm not sure I want to support option one, only because I've actually gone out for dinner quite a number of times in the last year, in fact, maybe the last 3 years, and I'm very impressed at what our business community has already done. I don't think I have had a single plastic or foam container given to me, other than maybe when I purchase meat from the local food store. That's about the only time I ever get any foam, and even then I'm noticing less. So because so much work has already been done, and effectively it's a law trying to chase a problem that's already relatively solved. Yes, it would be easy to do. However, it would also enforce additional costs with respect to bylaw enforcement, and I'm not sure that's the main reason why I would not support option one. Staff is recommending option 4. That seems the most reasonable. It does look like the federal government is going to do the heavy lifting here, and the province following upon that. And in some ways, if they can put things in place that offloads, it would be so nice for us to offload for once onto that level of government instead of them continuing offloading onto us. I'd like to take advantage of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm just going to ask if we can reasonably stick to more questions and less in the way of commentary until we get a motion on the floor. But clarifying the sort of the general stance is a good one to bring forward at all times, really. Sorry, and when I was listening to you, Councillor Green, I heard in there a question. I couldn't remember what it was at the moment, but I think it's just for my clarification to Ms. Morden. There would be some timeline of implementation of option one, no matter what. Is that correct? I'm not sure with the ministerial rule changes what that is, but what is the time frame between, say, a council decision passing of bylaws and the actual implementation of enforcement on something like a bylaw, like a plastic bag ban?
Thanks, Your Worship. Both Saanich and the Esquimalt, and I believe Victoria, had a 60-day introduction period built into the structure of their bylaw. So once the bylaw actually got through the phases of adoption, which there was, of course, public input on that, then there was a 60-day introduction period that was introduced, where they were doing much of the communications work involved with the businesses to inform them of the upcoming changes, to let them know, to prepare for the implementation of the bylaw 60 days from adoption. So that is a consideration there. And certainly within option one, we did build it out in a way that would involve communications and bylaw as well. So we have thought of their involvement too there. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Morden. I hope you don't mind me turning your comment into a question there, Councillor Green. I thought it was just worth getting some clarification. Go ahead. Are there any other questions of staff at this point? If no questions at this point, I'll go to Councillor Appleton. Just want to remind the public that if anybody from the public wishes to address council, this is the time to raise your hand, either through the 1855 number where you hit *9, or through the Zoom app itself where you would hit the reactions tab and raise hand. At this point, no one from the public has indicated they wish to speak, so I'm going to go to questions, check again with the public, and then we'll get to motions and debate. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Oh, apologies, Your Worship. I'll wait for the public then, because I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, sounds good. I'll come back to you then. I think I've already should have said that we don't have members of the public who have called in on this item. Ms. Morden, I just want to make sure I'm clear that you're not seeing anything that I'm not seeing on my screen in terms of public input. Nobody has raised their hand indicating they wish to speak at this time.
Thank you. I do see one phone number, but I haven't seen the hand raised in the throughout the meeting.
Thank you for that. No, they've been in attendance here listening, I believe, but have not yet indicated they wish to speak. But if anybody here, and that was 9907, if they wish to speak, hitting *9 would be the appropriate thing to raise your hand. But not seeing a hand raised, I will go to Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm willing to move at this time that development of a checkout bag regulation bylaw be added to staff work plans for 2022, which represents option 1 in the staff report.
Okay, number 1 is moved and seconded. Thank you. Do you wish to add anything to that, Councillor Appleton?
Your Worship, I would. Thank you very much. I reference in making this motion, I reference what I read in the feedback from the businesses, and I do recognize that there was concern as this has come before council before as to the impact to businesses. So I respect that the survey has been sent to local businesses, and we've heard their feedback. There are some striking comments made in that commentary from local businesses. Reducing plastic is an expectation. Stop the wait and see. Overwhelmingly in favor of a single-use plastics ban. And so these are the business owners that are telling us this. We asked them to tell us what they thought, and this is what the feedback that they're giving us. So this, to my mind, represents a very easily implemented. Staff have indicated the resource requirements are low. The ease of implementation is quite easy now with template bylaws, and it puts us into alignment with neighboring jurisdictions and allows us to take some action on something which does not which allows us to make an impact on something and not wait for federal implementation as late as 2024. So I feel that a lot of the questions that council may have had, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but a lot of questions that council may have had about the impact and the relative difficulty of implementing this over the last year or so have largely been answered in my view. So I'm hopeful that council is willing to take this step. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion as it's sitting here? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka, and I'll go ahead, Councillor
Thank
Zelka.
you. I'll be speaking against that particular option. The $5,000 upfront cost plus the unknown costs for enforcement are a concern for me, especially since most of the impact of this initiative has already been accomplished, thanks to Victoria Sanych and the general public doing and our business doing. I guess how do I say it, the right thing without the heavy weight of the law behind the initiative. So I very much appreciate the fact that that the work's already done. And while on one hand, staff can run around and create a bylaw, I just don't see any need for it right now, other than waiting just to see what may have to happen at the federal level and the provincial level, since we know there's changes happening there. And I would hate to have to go and make a bylaw and then have to change it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Green, did you wish to speak on this? I just want to make sure I give you a chance. It's hard to see your hand on this screen.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney.
I'm going to just very quickly. I've been persuaded by the ease with which this can be implemented. The alignment with the other communities. The template we have now that we didn't have when we were first looking this, authorized by the province. I remember we put a motion forward back in 2011. That was 10 years ago to do something like this. So, we could wait for the feds and, but I think because of the lack of resource and the ease with which this can be done and the alignment that there's normally I'd wait for the federal thing because it would just all be done. But because there's already been so much uptake on this with our neighboring communities, I think there's value in moving and support with the businesses. I think there's value in moving this forward. So I'm in support of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, I seconded the motion. I'm in favor of the motion. I don't think I want to wait around until 2023, 2024 for this to happen. I with the comments that Councillor Ney and Councillor Appleton have made, so I will be voting in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's interesting discussion here. I appreciate both sides. I feel that we are maybe coming a little late to the party on this one, but and particularly when I see, certainly in my own neighborhood, I don't think the single-use plastics that are coming out of merchants in Oak Bay, because our merchants are, as Councillor Zelka has pointed out, they've been doing a pretty good leadership job in managing this. And I see more refuse coming out of the neighborhood from all of the deliveries that are being made now with single-use cardboard and plastics. But that's another subject. On this, though, if we go with option one, so that we are directing staff to go forward with this immediately, at what point would we actually be in a position to start enforcing this in the district?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Ms. Morden, have you worked out, I guess it depends when that draft bylaw is brought forward and gone through its first, second, third, and adoption readings, and then the notification period. But can you give us a sense of timelines of where staff see that happening?
Thank you, Your Worship. So corporate services staff would aim to prepare a report and draft bylaw before the end of Q1. We would be collaborating with our colleagues in bylaw and communications to figure out what those pieces look like. And certainly in terms of what the enforcement, or perhaps it looks more like education, looks like, what's feasible within their current workload. We do need to outline that as part of a report that comes back to council in terms of the legal aspects of the bylaw. It's some of these bylaws have been challenged, and so it's really important for us to clearly outline that for council, and that's been put forward in a public meeting. So yeah, we would bring that report back before the end of Q1 would be our goal.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Patterson?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you. Before I go back to second time speakers and you, Councillor Zelka, I'm just gonna make a comment. I was not originally planning on supporting this. I was looking at option 4, but I can support it given the arguments made here. Two key things for me. One, we no longer have to go through the ministerial order and all of that cumbersome piece. We have the ability just to implement and move it forward. The feedback of the business community itself indicates that they're ready for this, and it does bring us into alignment with other aspects that I brought in months ago. So I think there's no harm in that front of it. I was really struck, though. I just want to make this comment. In the federal report, it says that municipal regulations, or speaking to municipal regulations, they say that, quote, patchwork of rules that seek to address issues that are in essence national and international in scope. And I think, this is the reality, that we can make these pieces, and this is largely symbolic, as we've already sort of got a largely no plastic commercial sector anyway. But I think it's important for us to keep this pressure on the national scale, because this is really where it's just so much simpler, because no vendor can change the rules based on Oak Bay regulation, but they will for a national, and that's really where this impact has to happen. So, but all that being said, I'm comfortable with this. It's a low impact to staff and in alignment with the region kind of approach, which I'm okay with. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with what you just said. This is a symbolic thing since it's relatively done already. Also, option 1 is really only for the plastic bags. It's not for the other components, because the model bylaw for those other components are not available yet. Other components being polystyrene foam, containers, plastic utensils, stir sticks, and others. The model bylaw is not ready for that. So it sounds to me like we definitely will have to have work plans adjusted if we wanted to address those other items as well. So that's why I'd rather have our staff that's already chock-a-block full of work with their work plans. I hate them doing symbolic things. But thank you. We'll see where the votes go.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't see any other hands up for discussion at this point. So I'm ready to call the question. The question here, the motion is to option 1, to move forward with a single-use ban of single-use plastic bags. And so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Zelka opposed. That carries, so that moves forward. Is there any other motions arising? Councillor Appleton, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So motion arising from that, thank you. Calling Council's attention to the second portion under option number 2 in the staff report. This is on page 9 of the staff report. So there's a second portion to address further items. So I would move that development of an amending or replacement bylaw to expand regulations to include polystyrene foam containers and plastic utensils/stir sticks be added to staff work plans for 2022, pending the publication of a model bylaw for BC local governments.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Seconded by Councillor Green. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this, I appreciate Council's support of the initial motion. This motion has been presented here by staff to talk about exactly as was just discussed, that model bylaws for additional materials are pending. I think Council has indicated, I don't want to speak for Council, but what I hear from Council is that the presence of the model bylaw and the ability for local governments to now take action independently of a provincial review makes a significant difference as to the ability to implement these bylaws. So if those two things are applicable, the availability of a model bylaw and the ability to implement such a bylaw without provincial review is applicable to these other materials, then I would seek to also have the bylaw expand to cover those materials when those model bylaws are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other discussion, Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, I'm really struggling with it. I really wish I could support that, but I really am feeling that I would prefer to support an option for a bylaw, an option for option, because I don't know if I want to add that much more onto the work plan right now. I think I would rather wait and see what's coming up from the Government of Canada in regards to what they're ready to do. So it says here that option 4 would refer this report back to staff to include the following initiatives in their 2023-2024 work plans and the budget request. And I think that option 4 fits better for me. So sadly, I'm going to have to vote against option 2. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Green, you were the seconder. Did you wish to speak at all to this motion?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Appleton has articulated his position well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Any other discussion on the motion as it stands here? I just have a, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I'm sorry, it took me a hard time to find the button there. No, I'll be voting against for similar reasons to Councillor Braithwaite. I'd definitely like to see what the federal government does, and if they prevent any of the materials from coming into Canada, then this is option 2 is moot. Thank you. I do also note that the Oak Bay Tea Party, the wonderful volunteers basically do this work and have been doing this work for a number of years with respect to the foam containers, the stir sticks, and the single-use plastics. They've done an amazing job at minimizing and in many ways eliminating that level of work. So another opportunity to say incredible thanks to our volunteers for that particular initiative and for showing Oak Bay how to do it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I guess for my clarification from perhaps Ms. Morgan, you can answer this for me. I struggle with this a little bit largely because I don't know what the impact of staff will be on that, with that model bylaw coming forward. I don't know if you can even answer the question, but I guess through me to staff, is there any sense of what that looks like in terms of developing, if there's a model bylaw produced, what does that then turn to us in terms of work after that? Is that just a rubber stamp when we just do it? Or is that waiting until it's been tested in a court of law? Is that tweaking it to Oak Bay? Can you give us some sense of what that looks like? Because this motion seems to give some direction to just do that work when it comes forward. Ms. Morton, can you answer that question?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, we really would have to take a close look at the model bylaw when it became available. There is a chance, and same with option 1, that we may be walking these bylaws back at the end of 2022, depending on the implementation of the federal regulations and what those ultimately look like. I have not seen how other municipalities who have gone beyond a plastic bag bylaw and to ban other materials such as these, how they're reacting to the federal regulations, if they're planning to walk back their bylaws and their enforcement, or what the plan is there, but we can certainly keep an eye on that as well. There would be increased impacts with option 2, but I would need to work with staff on outlining those for you, and then also have a really close look at the bylaw and probably a conversation with Mr. Lidstone to figure out some of the intricacies there.
Okay. Thank you very much for that answer. I think based on that and my preference to kind of try and speed up our own facilitation of people's recycling on the streets and so forth, that if we're going to focus time and energy to try and speed that side of the equation up under option 4. So I don't think I'm going to be supporting this, but I'm still open to convincing by other members of council at this point. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? I don't see any. So the motion on the floor is to the second part of option number 1 here, which is to, for once the model bylaw is developed, to have undertake of the ban of the plastic utensils, stir sticks, etc. To go forward. So, Councillor Ney, you wish to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for my mute button there. Yeah, I struggle with this one too, but when I weigh it all up, as much as I would like to expedite this and move forward, it just doesn't seem, I'm surprised I'm saying this because I typically, like to expedite, environmental issues now regardless. And, but I just find there's too many unknowns here. I'm not convinced we have the capacity right now. And in the not too distant future, we may have to backtrack. And I think it's a bit of a complex issue because we don't have enough information. So, yeah, I'm not going to support this. It's not an easy decision, but I'm not going to support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. And I always appreciate when people are going to vote against something to speak, because I think it's important for other people to understand the rationale, not just be silent on those things. So thank you for doing that. I don't see any other hands up at this point. So I'm going to call the question. This is on the second part of option number 1. All of those in favor? And those opposed? I have Councillor Patterson, Braithwaite, Zelka, and Ney is what I saw, and myself, Mayor Murdoch, also opposed. So that fails with a vote of 5-2. Are there any other motions arising?
So I would like to move option 4, but as obviously assuming that the plastic bags will be taken out of the 6 categories that are talked. I guess it has to be taken out. I'm not sure. I'll just move option 4. How's that?
Yeah, I think if there's, given the motion that was made previously, I just want to clarify,
Yeah.
Ms. moved and seconded, Ms. Morton, the wording is understood to essentially to exclude the topic of plastic bags.
I'm so sorry, Your Worship. Can you just point me to where you're looking, Councillor Braithwaite, just so I can confirm?
Sure. This is under proposed resolution of option 4 is preferred, page 11 of 49 on the staff report, I believe.
Yes. So, okay. Communications.
At the bottom of page 10, it says the 6 categories of single-use plastic items. I'm assuming it's only 5 since we've already done.
Oh, thank you for that. No, that refers to the federal regulations, and they will include checkout bags.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will move option 4 as it is.
So this is, just to be very clear, adding into work plans, communications and outreach activities, and the possible addition of recycling and compost infrastructure in the commercial areas.
Yeah.
So we're all, if anybody's watching, doesn't have that access to the agenda. Anything else? It's moved and seconded before Councillor Zelka, before I go forward. Councillor Braithwaite, is there anything else you wish to add on that piece?
No, I think it's all been said. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
So I just want a second for discussion. So a clarification would be helpful with staff. Is that I believe this would be in the timeline of a new council. So would this bind the following council, or would this just come forward in the next council timeline based on if this motion passes? What would be the process? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Ms. Borden, this is probably, I guess, more the communication outreach piece, because the second part would obviously be a council direction at some point that would require more work to actually undertake. So perhaps you can speak to Councillor Zelka's point.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. So for looking into 2023 and 2024, staff would be working on their work plans and budget requests in the fall. So my thought is that this would be coming forward to the next council.
All right, thank you. I'll be supporting the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in favor of the motion that's on the floor because I do appreciate the information that, to have staff gather some further information and do the work that's outlined in the options. So I'm broadly in favor, but I will take the opportunity to just express my disappointment. I don't agree philosophically with the general idea of waiting for the federal regulations to prescribe our what actions we can take. The federal level will put in place blanket standards that will have a broad impact, as we all recognize. In my view, we have a responsibility as an individual municipality to take those steps that we have available to us. So I don't agree with the general concept of deferring to federal direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Zelka.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to, I couldn't tell whether this was in favor or opposed to the motion from the previous comments. Just wanted some clarification. I didn't understand.
Councillor Appleton was speaking in favor of this motion. Any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor? That's right. And Councillor Green, I'm just going to go back and confirm with you just because you're a bit small on my screen here. Did you wish to add any comments? No? Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm having trouble hearing some of you. The volume is not as good in the chamber as it is probably online. Sorry, Chair, Mayor. I will support the motion, but I would also agree with Councillor Appleton's comments that I remember, I think it was at the very beginning of our term when a contingent of students came in from Monterey, and that was their single request of this council, their single ask was to do something about this kind of waste material. So, and then of course, Councillor Ney pointed out that this has been around since 2011 in terms of Oak Bay Council. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I appreciate the comments, and there's no harm, but I don't want to get in the habit here of us actually revisiting former decisions by the council. At that point, chance to speak is before the debate and not after the fact. So that just, as long as we can kind of keep moving forward on things, that's helpful. Any other discussion on the motion that's in front of us? Don't see any, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Any other motions arising on this item? I need a motion to receive the report. If I can get that motion moved and seconded, thank you. Any discussion on the receipt? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, none opposed. I believe that completes that item without seeing anything else. So Ms. Morden, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything procedurally on this one. I'm second guessing myself now.
Okay, just 1 second. I'm second guessing too. So you had just come to the end of that on receipt of report?
Yes, we've moved option 1 and option 4 and receipt.
Yes, nope, nothing else procedurally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're on to number then 8.1. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I guess you would have to call this a motion rising. On page 11, It talks about possibly you sending a letter on our behalf. It also talks about council following up with communications to local businesses with respect to the federal government proposed regulations. I'd like to move that council consider follow-up communications with local business to ensure they are aware of the proposed regulations and public comment period and encourage their participation.
Is there a seconder?
I'll
Moved and
second.
Seconded. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Zelka?
Yeah, the reason why we're doing that is that effectively this would be an aspect of public engagement. It would also inform our business colleague, the businesses within Oak Bay, that there is a process that is happening at the federal level, so that they're not wondering why we didn't do the whole thing. We only did part of it, and they could see with respect to the communications we're putting out there that we would like them to participate ideally. So it's really two birds with one stone, which is why I would propose that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion on that motion? It's moved and seconded. Not seeing any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you, Councillor Zelka, for that. Any other motions arising? I don't want to move so fast that we don't get a chance to tackle them. I do not see any, so I will move on then to item number 8.1, new business. There's been no notices of motion provided, but there was some discussion in the delegation portion of pieces. So procedurally here, really if it's something to do with the delegations, under the procedures bylaw, it would be to again refer to a future council meeting or for a staff report on something, or if you wish to just have direct staff or through Ms. Varela in terms of some bringing back some information that would be appropriate at this point. Is there, Councillor Patterson, you had something you wish to raise?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I really, I was very pleased and very impressed with the thoughtful.
So we can't commentate. If there's a notice of motion, you either have to lift the motion or just notice that you're going to bring a motion.
I will bring a motion. Would you like me to speak on the general framework of what I would like to see in the motion?
So we're trying to keep notices of motion to the literal words of the motion. So there's notification to the public and to the and to council, and then that would come back as a. But if it's something that requires any staff input, it would be referral to the staff.
I'm happy to do that, Mayor.
Okay. So yeah, thank you.
So I will then present the motion that whereas Council supports the Canada Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the framework for reconciliation, it resolved that Council directs staff to refresh the history page on the district's website to reflect the true history of this area and acknowledge the treatment of the people whose lands we occupy, and to create a website placeholder for notices of events and resources that support strengthening the district and the community's relationship with the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And further, that Council requests the Mayor appoint a task force to bring forward recommendations for collaborating and unifying the districts and committees and community associations on building paths to reconciliation with Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and in a manner that is respectful of First Nations and their resource capacity.
Thank you. Notice of motion provided, and that'll come back to a future council meeting. Any other new business that people wish to bring up? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. And I don't want to put staff on the spot here, but I have a procedural question that I just want to get a bit of clarification on if I can. Earlier on, as a motion arising from the delegations portion, specifically referencing section 5.2 on the Moto car sharing component, a motion was made and passed to request further information from staff, which I approve of. What I'm wondering is if we could have just staff comment on there are three opportunities, or at least three sort of quote unquote recommendations that are laid out in that presentation. Can I just confirm with staff that the response, the motion that was made to request a response addresses these 3 items. Can I just confirm that? I think that was my understanding of it, but can I confirm that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. That was my understanding as well. Ms. Morden, can you just confirm that?
And sorry, Your Worship, was that with respect to the Moto presentation?
That's
or
correct.
the-
Item number 5.2 on the Moto, there was 3 specific asks, and we asked for information to come back on those items back to a future meeting of council.
Yes, so the referral to staff would include comment coming back on those 3 items in particular.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that would be captured in the resolution. Yes.
That's good,
Your
Councillor
Worship,
Appleton.
I just wanted to confirm that just in case there was a need for further motion arising to support that. Thank you.
This is the perfect time to get that clarification, so thank you for asking the question. Any other discussion? Not seeing any, so I will just look for a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we will see you all next week.
Night, night.
Good night.